Rotorua. Welcome back everybody to this very first meeting of this year of the Rotorua Lakes Council. It's a pleasure to be back from a well-deserved summer break, I think, for all of us, and a pleasure to be back into business with you all as well. So I'd like to welcome also those attending in the Galleria, anyone who is also attending via a live stream, and also of course the media that's present today at Rotorua Daily Post. Just a reminder, if your mobile phones could please be on silent, and we'll look to take a morning break at 11 a.m. and then also a lunch break for 1 hour at 1 p.m. I'd like to ask and invite Councillor Kaifong to open our meeting with the karakia.
Morena koutou, Happy New Year everyone. I think I can still say that until tomorrow, since it's the last day of January. Ki e noi tātou. A tūtaua mai runga, tūtaua mai raro, tūtaua mai roto, tūtaua mai waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call for apologies. I do have one apology from Councillor Wang, who will be joining us any minute, and also Councillor Waru for lateness. He expects to join us by a morning tea due to another commitment. May I please have a mover and a seconder? That's moved by Councillor Maxwell, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. All those in favour to accept the apologies of Councillor Wang and Councillor Waru for lateness, please say aye. Thank you. Any declarations of interest this morning? There appear to be none. Any urgent items not on the agenda? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ooh, that's loud. So while there is a reference to the Housing Accord later in the agenda, there's no direct reference to the activities of Kāinga Ora or MSD or MHUD. Now, most of us will have seen the front page of the Daily Post on the 14th of January. More than 60 developments with 600 homes by the end of 2025. There are 933 applicants on the public housing register with 258 households in our emergency hotels. Well, not ours, but Rotorua's.
Sorry, Councillor Patterson, happy for you to continue, hold that thought, but can you just let us know what the urgent item is?
A sec, you'll get to it. So now I've been approached by a number of concerned citizens who are wanting to know who these developments are for. Local people in need, which, hey, we all agree that's a good thing, or anyone from across the country. Now, this issue is a major concern to our community and will not go away until it's addressed. Any work on our reputational rebuild, which we've invested significant resources and time and staff, will be wasted unless we get our house in order. So if our people don't believe that our city is a safe and fantastic place to visit, they will not back this plan. And if that doesn't happen, we're wasting our money. To that end, my point, Madam Chair, is that I ask this council to invite Darren Toy to attend our next council meeting to outline Kāinga Ora, MHUD, MSD and their overall strategy to get to the truth once and for all for our community so we can put this behind us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson, and that would be more relevant for the community and district development community. Our Group Manager, Jean-Paul Gaston, would usually provide updates in his progress report there, but we're happy to send an invitation to Darren Toy to see if he would like to join that committee, which is the most relevant.
Thank you.
And Councillor Lee, did you have an urgent item as well?
Yes, I did, Your Worship, actually several. Firstly, I submitted a notice of motion last week, as I had the previous month, and this was to do with disestablishing the Ngāti Whakāui Gifted Reserves Protocol Committee and recommending that elected members review and reconsider any decisions made by this committee to ensure they're in the best interests of the District Council. So that notice of motion hasn't appeared on the council website, and neither did the notice of motion from last month. In the interests of transparency, should not these notice of motions be published, and together with reasons for rejection?
Your notice of motion was rejected, Councillor Lee. It did not meet the criteria to come to this council agenda.
So the public, you're saying, are not entitled to weigh up and consider whether the reasons for the rejection are justified?
That was not my words. I was confirming that your notice of motion was rejected because it didn't meet the criteria for it to be brought to the council.
I understand that, but the public surely have a right to read the notice of motion, compare it to the reasons for rejection, and then consider whether or not the reasons for rejection are valid or not. Isn't that how a transparent local government would work?
That is your personal opinion, Councillor Lee, but a transparent local government makes sure that we follow standing orders and that we follow the correct processes so that we have accurate and possible information on the table. It would not be possible for this council to make a decision that you are requesting for the disestablishment of that protocol committee.
It wouldn't be possible?
We have already provided an explanation to you by email, Councillor Lee. It has been rejected. We can see that you are obviously not pleased with that. However, we must ensure that we keep order in this council agenda, and we can't have people bringing their personal opinions to the table when this council has no ability or perhaps no desire to disestablish a committee.
For the benefit of the public, could you please...
I'm going to call that to an end now. We've discussed that longer than expected. Do you have another urgent item?
Yes, I do. I understand Mr. Terry Hammond, the owner of the Lakeland Queen, requested to speak to us under Standing Order 15, which is public forums. I understand that was rejected. Perhaps you could explain for the benefit of the public why his request was rejected.
I'll just ask our Group Manager of Governance to explain the process and why that was not possible.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you. So, under the standing orders, Standing Order 9.4 provides the Council to select an order of business. So that is the creation of the agenda. Council back in 2016, under that standing order, agreed by resolution to have a set standing order, which we are still using to this day. That order of business does not include, at this point in time, for public forums to be a part of your general business on your agenda. Discussions around the order of business happen at the beginning of any triennium, and when my team was working with the chairs and the mayor, there was no discussion on a revised order of business. So until such point in time, we maintain the order of business that was adopted by resolution in 2016. So currently, a public forum does not exist in the setup that this council has at this time.
And Councillor Lee, I have asked you, and if you could please make sure that you seek advice from staff or myself or the chair of the relevant committee before advising or encouraging anybody to take up these opportunities that are unfortunately not available. There are, of course, other opportunities to meet with or discuss with councillors any issues that our members of public have, which we are always welcome and with open arms to hear. So were there any other urgent items not on the agenda?
Just one. Madam Chair, are you aware that the Rotorua Council, as far as I'm aware anyway, is the only council that does not have public forums in its order of business, whereby members of the public can come for the first 30 minutes of a council meeting and address us?
You are continuing your previous urgent item. We have a very full agenda. I would like to get on with business, and this is becoming quite tiresome. Please only raise legitimate urgent items with us, not your personal opinion. Are there any other urgent items? Yes, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, and may I thank you and also our two committee chairs, Councillor Kaifong and Councillor Barker, for recording and accepting my apologies in late December due to a hospital issue. And to all those staff, I hope you all had a pleasant Christmas and New Year, and my apologies I couldn't attend. Could I just raise, and I appreciate our full agenda for today, if not possible today, Could we at a future meeting in February, I have some concerns over some of the, what I would call inconsistencies around statements and messaging around the Lakeland Queen decision, but also the forum in which it was held. I'm not going to refer to that today because it's a confidential, it was a confidential document. Personally, whether the whole document needs to be confidential, I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't be referring to specific, commercial activities, just some issues around, and I appreciate today may not due to time, but I would hope at a future meeting, a full council meeting, an ordinary person, a member of the public would have an expectation, I believe, and a reasonable expectation to hear from councillors who participate in some of those decisions, to hear questions be asked around them, and also the flow-on effect from those decisions. So I'll leave it at that. If we don't have time today or later on at the end of the meeting, I would appreciate an opportunity in February for us to revisit some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll seek further information on exactly what you would like after the meeting, and we'll find the best opportunity to bring that forward.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. There appear to be no other urgent items for the agenda. So we'll get into our reports. We'll start with the confirmation of the minutes. So this is on page 6 of your agenda. May I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the council meeting held on 13th of December 2023 be confirmed as true and correct? It's moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Barker. Were there any items needing to be discussed for correctness? Yes, Councillor Barker.
It's actually more a question, Madam Chair. The annual report was tabled until the audit letter had been received. Is there any progress on that matter?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. The final queries were closed out on the 11th of January with audit, and there was some further clarification late last week with some of the team. We are just awaiting back hearing from the audit director as to the next steps and when it is expected to be completed.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour, please say aye. Against. Thank you. And then we move to the minutes of the emergency council meeting held on the 20th of December. This was the extraordinary one held to confirm the appointment of our new chief executive. May I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the council meeting on 20th of December are true and correct record. That's moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. Any items for correctness? Nope. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. And just to confirm, as has been made by the announcement, that we look forward to welcoming Andrew as our new Chief Executive on the 11th of March. So we'll now start our staff reports. We are beginning with our financial performance for the 6 months ended 31st of December 2023. Please have a mover and a seconder to receive the report. Moved by Councillor Barker, seconded by Councillor Wang. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Thomas and David to overview the report and I believe speak to a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning, councillors. We didn't have a financial update in December due to the timing of the December council meeting, and so we weren't able to update you on the progress of the financial performance at the end of November, but we did do a bit of a verbal where we were pretty much on track and consistent with the previous reporting. And in a way, that trend has continued, but there is a little bit of a new trend evolving, particularly around our fees and charges, which I'll just go into a little bit later on. So overall, we are about 13 million behind budget, with 99% of that variance falling down to the as you'll recall, within our revenue lines, we do account for and budget for capital subsidies that support and fund our capital, some of our capital projects. And when those capital projects don't hit milestones or haven't started to achieve some of those external revenues, such as the museum project, then obviously we don't receive those subsidies, and hence why we are reporting such a large shortfall behind budget with regards to the capital subsidies. And that is predominantly, as I said, down to the timing of those capital works projects that actually haven't started or haven't achieved those milestones and therefore aren't incurring that expenditure. The remainder of it is a little bit more with regards to development contributions revenue. We have seen a little bit of an uplift in that recently, and so that's trending into the right direction. And we're seeing, with regards to the future pipeline and the number of resource consents with regards to some decent-sized subdivisions, we expect that those revenues will come back on budget into the future. But it is pleasing to see that that's progressing well. And then underneath of it all actually is the operating surplus and deficit. And what we have seen in the previous months, we were pretty close to or just a little bit better than budget. And what we have done is now we've just fallen short by $100,000 of achieving our operating budget. The main contributor to that actually is our fees and charges, but within the result, and you'll see it in the report, there's lots of overs and unders, and there is quite a bit of offsetting and mitigation taking place, but there is just a little bit of a trend that we're monitoring, and we'll do some actions to try and remediate, and that's actually around our user fees. And so what we've done here is what this graph illustrates is the blue dots represent pretty much every single one of our activities within council that has a revenue target, and so within that box that shows either a $200,000 positive variance or a $200,000 negative variance against budget for those revenues. And what it is showing is that on the far right side of this graph is that there are a number of activities that are falling behind budget and need some interventions. The main ones are the regulatory inspections, so that is around some resourcing that needs to be resolved. The DVR revenue is just a timing one around when that revenue is received from the Bear Plenty Regional Council. But the main area of focus needs to be around our parking revenues and also our revenues for our events and venues, and in particular around the Energy Event Centre and the Performing Arts Centre. And with those lagging behind the way that they are impacting the overall council financial result. And as I said, within there, you'll see that there are some overs and unders, and we have the ability to offset, but we do need to have a little bit more focus in the coming 6 months to ensure that we can try and move those ones back to budget or mitigate any further deficit against budget going forward. With regards to our capital expenditure, it is progressing well. We're probably on track to probably, if we proceed the way that we're going, is probably have our largest or our most significant capital investment to date. We're probably on track of achieving about $100 million by the end of the year. The bulk of that is obviously into our renewal program is progressing well with regards to renewing our infrastructure, but also our stormwater, our sewage, in particular around completing Rotoiti, Rotorua sewage schemes, the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, and the other large project that's progressing well is the aquatic centre refurbishment. And so we are expected to end the year not quite on budget, except we will probably have quite a significant spend and progressing well through our capital works program this year. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your report, gents. Just going back to one of the earlier slides, the Energy Event Centre and the Sir Howard Morrison Centre. If I recall correctly, in the annual plan, part of our strategy for revenue was increasing the commercial capability of the Sir Howard Morrison Centre. If this trend continues, is that likely to be impacted?
Yes, possibly. I think we need to remind ourselves too, it is the first full year of operations of the Performing Arts Centre. The sector as a whole across New Zealand has been a little bit deflated with regards to demand and so forth, and so some of the challenges that we're seeing around the revenue space and the amount of events coming into New Zealand and coming to Rotorua in particular hasn't quite been where it has been expected. Talking to Janelle, our Performing Arts Director, one of the challenges we've found as well, which wasn't expected, is that for large events that are because the event is so new and it's been closed for 5 years, it's that lack of history. And so some of the challenges is actually encouraging those events to come to Rotorua. And it's hard to do that sometimes when you don't have incentives that could encourage them to come. So that team has to work quite hard to get them as well. But it is trending in the right direction. And at the moment, I think Janelle and the team are just exploring other opportunities around how to explore and encourage and grow that sector a little bit quicker. So yeah, so while revenues aren't where they need to be, the events that have come have had good turnouts and have sold out predominantly as well and have performed well. But as I said, it's just the sector as a whole across New Zealand is a little bit flatter than where it was probably pre-COVID. One day we'll stop saying pre-COVID, but and it is building in the right direction. But it is, as I said, it's a bit of a challenge to achieve some of the budgets that have been set there at the moment.
Thanks for that supplementary question. Just also in the report itself, it talked about the fees. Part of the reason some of the fees were not coming in, the user charges, I should say, was because of a lower than expected visitor numbers, and that Rotorua was behind the rest of the country as far as the, I guess you could say, the coming back to that word pre-COVID. Have our friends at Rotorua NZ given you any indication as why that would be?
No. I think just some brief discussions I've had with Andrew is the composition of the visitors has changed as well. I think you'll see as well walking through Rotorua recently is you'll hear a lot more foreign accents and foreign languages, and so I think some of those things like the impacts on parking revenues and those sorts of things, it might just be that while there is a busyness, it's the compositional change. But Andrew and Rotorua NZ are in a much better place to give you an update on how the visitor season went and progressed, probably at the next update at CD&D.
Thank you.
Yes, that would be very good, thank you. I just also have a question regarding the Energy Event Centre and Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre. And obviously being 971,000 lower than budget is unfortunate. But I did wonder what sets the revenue targets for that? What is the benchmark that we are trying to achieve, understanding that it is still in its first year? I appreciate that the team have been working incredibly hard there. And I also appreciate that our community and our visitors have actually been enjoying some absolutely fantastic and shows there and a variety of performances. So I just wondered if you know what the benchmark is.
The benchmark was based on a business case that was done pre the decision to refurbish. So that was probably done back in 2018-19, obviously pre-COVID as well. And so that's where one of the baseline revenue targets was created, and then it was stretched a little bit further as well with regards to the previous annual plan. So that's where it has come from. And as I mentioned, their environment across New Zealand is probably a little bit flatter than when that business case was done. But I think as we've talked in the previous annual plan, also the council meeting pre-Christmas where we had Sharon Van Gulik present, that there is a bit of a focus with regards to the utilisation and how to encourage and grow both the performing arts sector and the utilisation of those assets.
Thank you. But certainly maybe a tough target considering all of the challenges that is happening across the country. But we do appreciate that we have very high expectations and standards for our Performing Arts Centre, and we look forward to ensuring that it continues to be successful in future. Were there any other questions? To Councillor Barker.
Just a quick one around the waste management contracts. I see that's 600k higher than expected. Is that inflationary adjustments or other reasons?
Primarily is to through inflationary adjustments primarily.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the Chair, thank you, gentlemen, for your report. Could I just again carry on from Councillor Patterson's query? On the bottom of page 14, user fee revenues remain significantly under budget, etc., blah, 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 which is recovering from COVID-19 disruption slower than the national average. So can I just ask, do you expect that to continue? Because from my meetings with retailers and hospitality over Christmas, New Year's, they seem to feel that the overseas, the tourism sector was good, but certainly the internal economic pressures were certainly felt. So I just have a concern that once the holiday summer period comes to an end, we may be in for some very difficult times. Again, just based on the rhetorical evidence that I've heard from owners.
Thank you, Councillor. Which is why, again, I'll focus it on here, that there are some concerns there. As I said, within the overall result, we've got ups and downs and we generally offset them, but there are some trends developing in the user fees. I think we've talked about some of the bigger ones that are having an impact, but I think if we look at the chart above and probably the right-hand 50%, the teams do need to focus on the performance of those, what is causing some of those to lag a little bit behind budget, and make sure that we take appropriate steps to lift where we can. And if we can't, then what are further steps that we need to take to try and offset that?
Thank you. And just, sorry, one final question. On page 17, just regarding the maintenance, can I just ask, can I just be reassured that by the end of the year, that will be back to as close to zero as, because much and all as I appreciate savings, I don't want short-term savings for long-term where we're paying a lot more for work that we could have done at the time. Thank you.
Just remember, councillors, that's our reactive maintenance budget, not our proactive one. And so we only do spend that if we need to. But we do have a couple of challenges that have developed over the Christmas period on a couple of buildings and community halls that need remediation. So it is likely that we'll that budget will be fully utilised by the end of the year. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. It's great to see that with the income, the bulk of it is due to the timing of the capital subsidies and grants. My question is just around the waste management fees, about 298,000 year to date ahead of budget. Is that primarily due to the increase in the levies? And do we anticipate that to, with the increase in levies over time, for that to increase as well?
Through the Chair. If you recall through the annual plan discussions, we did increase the levy as a result of underlying cost increases as well. So while the revenue is up, costs are also up, offsetting each other, and we do expect that to continue through the financial year.
Thank you. There appears to be no further questions. So we will move on. Thank you very much, Thomas and David. We will now move into our long-term plan items on our agenda. We will be starting with our long-term plan 2024-2034, supporting information part 1. May I please have a mover and a seconder to receive this report? It's moved by Councillor Barker, seconded by Councillor Kiriopa. All those in favour to receive the report, please say aye. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Una to overview this.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. So, councillors, just to do a little bit of a recap on where the LTP journey is at. At the end of the year, you as a council finalised your direction setting and things that were of high significance for you within the delivery plan of the 10 years. And so that gave the staff the opportunity to then start to construct how that is going to come together in your consultation document. In parallel to preparing the consultation document, the staff have been working on the preparation of all of the underlying supporting information, which essentially makes up the backbone of the LTP proper, which you'll adopt at the end of June. So as part of that process, when we do come around to adopting the CD and making that available for the community to provide feedback on, we also provide a range of documents which make up and support what it is that you as a council have decided to deliver, and provides that supporting information, that rationale, that why, where these issues have come about. So what we have today in front of you is the beginning of all of that supporting information, which, while in draft today, will be made available as part of the consultation document. And there are still opportunities for those documents to be fine-tuned. But what they do capture has been your intent and your direction that you have set over the last 3 or 4 months while we were in the LTP journey. So the documents that we have for you as the first grouping of supporting information are the significant forecasting assumptions, the environmental strategy and the asset management policy. With your indulgence, Madam Mayor, I thought the best way would be to take them one by one. If there are any questions, and I'll call upon the relevant group manager heading that piece of work if there are any questions. So thank you. Over to you. So the first one is the significant forecasting assumptions, and Mr. Colley can take any questions if there are any on that one.
Councillor Barker.
It's just a little point of clarification, probably, really. On page 14 of the long-term forecasting assumptions, it talks about societal change and the makeup of our community. And it says that there'll be an increasing proportion of Māori residents in our community, and which is the prediction that they're making. And then I notice in the asset management plan, there is quite a different sort of type of language used around the makeup of our society as well. I just wondered whether they needed to be more closely aligned. And that is on page 2 of the asset management plan. So just have a look at, have a look at that and to see.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. We'll get the team to have a look at those two and make sure that they are consistent. So thank you for pointing that out.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Assumption around the long-term interest rates. I would have thought we'd be seeing interest rates declining over a longer period of time, but is this just an effort to be conservative, or perhaps you can expand on how those numbers were derived?
A bit of both. So at the time when we did our first cut of the draft long-term plan, these assumptions were about 0.5% higher than you see now. And then pre-Christmas into one of the final drafts, we did see a bit of a drop in the interest rates. And so that has been reflected into the model. At the time of putting this document together, there were indications that the interest rates were going to plateau, which is why kind of at that 5.5% level, and so that is why we've got them increasing to that and holding. In saying that, even within the last 3 weeks, we have seen overall interest rates to council drop again by a further 0.5%. And so what we do is, as we get closer to finalising the LTP in June, we work with PricewaterhouseCoopers or PwC once again on these assumptions and reset them. And if the current trends do continue, we expect these to come down again, at least another 0.5%, and probably that tail end will come down a bit lower, which will also have an impact on the overall proposed rates increases as well. But at this stage, it's too early to assume what they may be again, so we will leave it for another 4 months and then reset this at time of finalisation. Hope that answers. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on page 8 of the forecasting assumptions report, resource consents designations. Who's involved in the process of lodging consents for our major projects? Let's say stormwater. Who does that?
The project team, generally if we have to lodge consents, the contractors or the project managers lodge them on our behalf, and so then goes internally back into Stavros' team who usually do those types of consents. But generally, because our projects are being delivered externally and being project managed by external professionals, it's those individuals that would lodge the consents on our behalf.
So these are projects that we as a council have all agreed to, and then it's moved down the process, down the chain as the next thing you get the consents, etc., etc.
Yep, so where we do them, we're obviously delivering projects that have been approved and adopted by council in either an annual plan or a long-term plan.
Right, thank you. And secondary question is the legislative demands on council resources. highlighted on page 9. What are we doing to mitigate those? Are we doing anything about that? With our new government, we've got the opportunity to try and put the screws on? Or?
I think the sector as a whole has been providing feedback to the new government with regards to what we have experienced probably over the last 4 or 5 years with regards to the demands, and I understand the government is considering how that looks at, but we are, unfortunately, if the government does decide that there is new regulations or things that we need to be accountable and report to, that does drive costs and demand into our organisation, as we've experienced quite significantly over the last 6 or 7 years. Yeah.
So just to clarify, we're working with our other council colleagues around the country to provide a united front and say, hey, we need to address this.
Yeah, local government New Zealand is generally the entity that advocates on quite strongly on behalf of local government. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Apologies, Madam Mayor, I didn't realise I had another question. A couple of questions on the museum exhibition funding. It's a large assumption, I think, to assume that it's going to be fully funded. I think, and that's not a small amount of money. What's your thinking behind that?
That was as we discussed in the workshops, Councillor. I think you are right that it might be a bit of a stretch with regards to that, and it may be based on feedback that we receive in the LTP that assumption and therefore the impact of how it's modelled in the plan may need to change, and it may need council contribution if council decides in the coming months as to whether it wishes to proceed with the museum project.
We'll deal with that later, I guess.
Yeah.
And one more, the Sala Street Chapel, I would humbly suggest that there needs to be an end date in terms of external funding, because we think we need to get on with it at some point. It can't be an open-ended thing, so I don't know whether that's a minor change if we all agree, to the LTP consultation document.
Yeah. So there is a small typo there in that table. It should say 1.25 million councillors instead of 250,000. And the progress there is more around partnering with a funeral operator to do a kind of a joint venture development partnership that way versus us doing the whole thing and then seeking external funding. So it probably therefore has a more of a finite life, because it'll have to be a JV type of arrangement.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm suggesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Kai Fong and then Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just following on from Councillor Brown's question, just around the museum. So in the sweet draft statement, it says that we have secured significant funding for the earthquake strengthening and restoration of the building, and we're confident of securing the remaining funding, and that the rebuild is expected to be completed within the next 2 to 3 years. Given that a decision is still to be made on that, and given that not all the funding has been secured for the full rebuild and strengthening and opening of the building, let alone the exhibition, is that statement or assumption needing to be slightly reframed?
No, we don't think so, Deputy Mayor. We believe that that assumption reflects where we currently are with regards to funding commitments and work that needs to take place.
Okay, I think my concern was just that we still have a decision to come around that. So are we providing, I suppose, well, it's an assumption, but for the public, there's that assurance that this is proceeding, and given that we still have to secure the rest of the funding and ensure that the project is going ahead with a decision still to be made, that assumption should be softened slightly. I don't know what my fellow councillors or Her Worship's views,
I
but
guess,
I think it's just a suggestion that I'm making, that, and perhaps others might have views on that.
And just with all of these 3 documents that we are discussing, they are only drafts at this stage until after public consultation. And so perhaps if it provides more certainty after the public consultation, when the council makes a decision, then we will have the final documents and we will have a better understanding of if that needs to be changed.
Okay, thank you.
In the meantime.
I do have one more question, but perhaps that's a question following on about museum.
Councillor Brown.
Welcome.
If I may, through you, Madam Chair, I think we'll know a lot more on Friday, and if there's some flexibility around the wording based on what happens on Friday, I think, Councillor Kaifong's position is reasonable, I think.
So the council itself is yet to make its decision on whether to award a contract or not. We anticipate that decision would be made, if not before the consultation document, then certainly by the time of the LTP decision making. So the wording of the consultation document and of the LTP will reflect the position at the time that it's published. At the current state, we're operating off the previous decision from late last year, which was to proceed. Now, it was very clear at that time that there is still work to be done around fundraising, but we, from the staff perspective, the wording reflects the position we're in right now, without predetermining the decision that you are yet to make. And we will update it as those decisions are made.
Thank you. I just want further question, sorry, Chair. It was just around the total number of rating units and the assumption for the growth estimated. Given our FDS, and I'm assuming the previous HBA predicates 12,400 over 30 years, then we would be 300-ish, rather than the lower number of the proposed household changes in the total number of rating units under number 21, page 15. That we should have more households paying rates.
I think this is tied to the Infometrics data. So Infometrics do our growth assumptions. So remembering there's probably lots of different data sets, but it's the Infometrics one that weaves through our infrastructure strategy and our LTP with regards to growth. And that one in particular has and of that they have different multiple ranges of what it could be. And we pick one of those, and this is the one that we've applied. So we are assuming therefore slightly higher growth at the start of the 10-year plan, with reducing towards the end. But overall, from memory, they are quite similar towards the end goal of achieving a similar number, but getting there in a different way.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I have Councillor Lee followed by Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Thomas, through the Chair. The environmental strategy document says that the partnership with Mana Whenua is embedded in the way that...
Sorry, Councillor Lee, we're not quite onto that one yet. We're still on the significant forecasting assumptions, but we'll come to that next if you'd like to hold your question.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Councillor Brown, can you tell me what's important about Friday? Something coming up Friday?
Oh, Councillor Maxwell, there are still just ongoing discussions as we reach to a confirmation of a successful tenderer. So that is still happening from operational level, and we will have an update to council and then to community as soon as possible.
Oh, so there's a meeting happening on Friday in the House?
There are a number of meetings and discussions happening.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do just have a quick question as well regarding climate change. I just wondered if the assumption that the risk to quote in this on page 11, the risk to council is low and gradual, and council will be better able to cope with the nature, extent and timing when events do occur. I do also note that there is the risk mentioned of the unbudgeted costs and impact on council assets due to the severity of weather events. And I just wonder if low is too conservative when we have incredibly high lake levels, when we have some homes that are already underwater. We certainly have a number of council infrastructure assets, including public toilets and playgrounds that are underwater. And as we continue to see high intensity rainfall, we are right now currently seeing multi-million-dollar impacts of climate change. So I just wonder if that needs to be considered as more of a medium risk, given the significance to our community and also the financial cost to council. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I've just been told that that will be reviewed. Were there any other questions on the significant forecasting assumptions? There appeared to be none. So we will now move on to the next document, the environmental strategy. I'd like to invite Stavros up to respond to any questions that councillors have on the environmental strategy. Thank you. Councillor Lee, you had a question regarding this?
I did, Madam Chair. Thank you. And through the Chair, Stavros, may I ask who drafted the environmental strategy?
My department did.
Okay. I see it says in here the partnership with mana whenua is embedded in the way RLC works. Can you explain what input that Te Tata o Te Arawa and the protocol committees had in the drafting of this document?
We're working with, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. As you are aware, and I think I note earlier with Councillor Patterson's questions about the regulatory and consenting inputs into everything we do. So now, all the works we're doing in infrastructure, whether it's with regards to securing water sources, the transmission of water and the distribution of water, the management of stormwater, and its effective diversion away from residential areas and commercial areas to minimize flood risk, the collection of wastewater and distribution and conveyance to a treatment plant, all these things require resource consents. These resource consents, before they're obtained, they need to demonstrate compliance or at least an awareness of environmental effects, of local effects, geotechnical effects, emissions to air, emissions to water, and also they need to be cognizant of mana whenua, whether it happens to be the mana whenua in that area that's affected by the works, their views and cultural and undertake a cultural impact assessment. Without undertaking all that work in identifying impacts and effects, we cannot get consents. The environmental strategy plan tries to put together under all this umbrella the protocols and the strategies and the outcomes that all these various resource consents have stipulated with regards to water uptakes, water conservation, quality of the water, the environmental health of the water, environmental health of our land, to give effect to strategies that we are participating in jointly with Rotorua Lakes Trust in the Rotorua Lakes Strategy Group. So there's no short answer to your question, but we are engaged continuously with mana whenua on various mana whenua and various protocol meetings and various groups in order to enable us to build, operate and maintain core infrastructure. And in order to do that, we need to be cognizant of mana whenua's views and aspirations and concerns about how those works take place. So when we've done this strategy, naturally we share that information and exchange views and opinions with Rotorua Lakes Trust, who do have an environmental plan. And we don't want to have an environmental plan that is inconsistent with the Rotorua plan. Now, our approach to that is one of consistency. We want to continue partnership and we want to continue collaboration. They're not dictating, they have not actually imposed on us what we need to put in this document. However, it's an informed process for which we try to understand their views and aspirations, and we try to embed them into our various infrastructure delivery programs. I hope that it's a bit complicated, but I hope that gives an indication as to how widely we are engaged with and informed by mana whenua's views and concerns. And and perspectives, in all matters of our environmental and public works activities.
Okay, so has TALT or Te Tātou Te Arawa or any of the protocol committees seen a copy of this draft document as yet?
Well, Te Arawa Lakes Trust have not copy of this document. They've seen our initial drafts and we saw their views, and in order to incorporate their views into the final draft, which at this point in time is in front of you. And the intent of that, of course, is to go to public consultation and comes back to you as part of the LTP consultation before it's finalised.
And on page 6, you refer to Te Arawa 2050 vision. If I understand correctly, was it the previous council who adopted the Te Arawa Vision 2050 as the council's vision? And is that still the case now?
I can confirm that is not correct.
Oh, what is this? What is correct, Your Worship?
It was not adopted by the council as the council's vision.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions on the environmental strategy? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a great start and I look forward to the feedback from the community. I picked this up before Councillor Lee has queried it, but does Rotorua Lakes Council have a vision around the environment? I see on page 6 a lot of the work stems from that, and something that I picked up previously. I thought that was missing in this document, but is there something I'm missing perhaps?
I think, sorry, Councillor Brown, I think our vision is embodied into this strategy. The fact that we make references to Te Arawa 2050 or to environmental outcomes or to environmental statutory requirements, I don't think should distract from the fact that, the core purpose of this, or our vision here, and I think there is more details later on, is that the primary concern we have here is to mitigate public infrastructure impacts on the environment. That's the most important element of the works we undertake. Of course, we're working together with other partners in terms of restoring and protecting our ecosystems, to promote the enable waste minimization and mitigating the cancer carbon footprints. But our primary purpose here is to make sure that those activities we are undertaking, they have the least possible adverse effects on our surrounding environments and also contribute to a gradual restoration of that. So if you're asking for a specific version which says what's our vision, and I think I would say that the vision, the purpose of the strategy here is to recognize that we are aiming to manage our programs and practices in a way that protects and restores our environment and contributes to council's community outcomes and environmental well-being. That's our general approach, to this kind of strategy.
I don't disagree with that, but this is a 30-year document, and in my mind, we would have something a picture that the community can buy into of what our whenua, our lakes, looks like, and that's somewhere we would aim to what we would achieve over the 30 years. Because I see this as a three-year review, and that's around the work plan, but that we would still be driving to a vision. And I just wondered whether this document should contain, and I look to the Mayor for her opinion on this, is whether we actually ask the community to participate in developing a vision, 30-year vision for the environment. That was the key thing for me. But I see also that the long-term, the reading that we got in December is different to what we've been given in our Stella, but and some of the changes have been fantastic. Being on. One thing I would add on top of the discussion around the vision is this will take collaboration across the board, all the government departments, every individual to participate in achieving, good outcomes for our environment. There's lots of, Waka Kotahi's road corridor, as an example, is a weed corridor. It's just transmitting weeds from one location to another. If we don't get them on board, as an example, we're always going to be gardening our own backyard. So I think there's potentially more, but this could come through in the feedback, more work to be done around advocacy and getting a wider partnership on board as part of this work. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. Can I sort of refer members to page 16, where we have a schedule of implementing the strategy. And when you look through that, it outlines a whole range of actions and lead agent responsibilities. And as you correctly said, Councillor Brown, this is a 30-year horizon. And one of the important things is actually to take stock and identify and collect evidence of what is the true current condition of our environment, the fresh waters, the biodiversity, the ecosystem, the erosion controls. And a lot of these activities describe that, which will lead us into an evidence-based priority action plan. So I think it'd be very hard to have what you call a statement which says this is everything we do. Good. But the proof of the successful of the strategy is that how well the information gathered by these actions and activities will help us to continue to improve, in all these areas. So, yeah, I believe that our objective here is going to be enabled by an ongoing and systematic gathering of evidence that requires, to be addressed. And give you a quick example. It's often said that our receiving waters, our streams are polluted. And the reality is that on the face of it, probably is correct in some, to some degree. The question is what are the main factors of that pollution and what are the main contributors to that? It needs to be identified so actions can be taken. There is a lot of contamination that arises from the upstreams of the catchments, from rural, farming area. There are urban pollution. And I think what we try to identify here is that, is to be more accurate and more precise as to what are the sources of this contamination, what is the level of contamination, or what are the practical and tangible actions that can be taken to mitigate that. And we need to have these programs of work and these activities in order to give us some practical and useful outcomes, going forward in the future.
And I'd also like to invite the interim CEO to provide a response as well.
I can also say I know Ross and his team had. That was one of the initial points of conversation, was around what is the vision of the council, because we haven't had a clear statement on that. In the end, I think his team went back to the workshop that you did right at the beginning of the LTP process, and one of the statements that was gathered at that workshop was Mauri Wai, Mauri Whenua, Mauri Toi, Mauri Ohanga, Mauri Tangata, Mauri Ora, which is on page 2. So that's just a statement, which is probably the closest that we've got of an articulation of what it is that council is trying to achieve, and that's translated as vitality and health of water and of land, of creativity in the economy, sustains the people and sustains life. That's a holding place, but that helped to inform the rest of the work program that his team has developed. But just to acknowledge that that was sort of the closest we could find to an articulation that the elected members have around aspirations for the environment that had been sort of recorded somewhere clearly, because I know that it's been a point of conversation throughout the workshops, but we felt that this one probably encapsulated things the best, but it is only a holding pattern, and we're more than open to a further articulation.
Thank you. Deputy Kaifong.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if this is too operational a question, but in part 2 it talks about the direction and the strategy for the next 30 years. theme 1 says, where are we now? It says we find it difficult to source native seedlings when required. And given that we do have a nursery down the road, in the theme of what we need to do, whether it's a nursery thing, but is that an opportunity for the council, given that quite a lot of the environmental strategy is around planting and urban trees and sponge cities and things like that, which will require lots of native plantings? So just a question around whether there should be something in the theme what we need to do around the plants and the nurseries. And my second question was just around the timing of the completion date for a lot of this work, because it's quite an extensive strategy and a lot of the work is predicated to be done within the next 1 or 2 years. So do we think that that's A, realistic, and B, from an LTP perspective, given that some of this work, I don't know the detail of it, is it funded, and are we going to be able to deliver it within our LTP funding?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I think if the outcome of, you mentioned earlier, the seedling of native trees is a shortcoming, then this investigation will identify how big is the shortcoming, what options do you have to bridge that shortcoming. A lot of the deadlines or timeframes for that, you would notice in the description of the activities, are basically gathering information for the next few years. And I would expect that that gathering of information will inform various other activities in terms of our stormwater management, of our sewage management, of our open spaces and parks management. I don't think we'll achieve all the outcomes within the time frame you see there. The time frames you see there, it's a time we need to do investigation and create an evidence-based forward program for the next 30 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the Chair, thank you for your report, Stavros, very helpful. Your Worship, if I could just continue on from my respected colleague, Councillor Brown, who I always have a lot of time for, even when we don't agree. I just wonder, despite how practical it is to have a statement on the environment when we already have, through central government, national policy statements on everything, between water, land, sky, what colour tie you wear, resource consent laws that change with every government, regional councils, plan changes all left, right and centre, significant natural areas coming in my opinion, impinging on individual property rights, rules around nutrients. Personally, I think we've got enough of this stuff. Now, a basic to help guide councils, absolutely, but I think we've got enough, personally, I think we've got enough rules and regulations, and I just wonder how practical it is to try and mould all those with the various changes that come around all the time into a document that can be living as well as practical. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll certainly take that feedback on board, and yes, it is always a moving target with the various changes to government policy that we must adhere to as well, and national policy statements. We have Councillor Lee and then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and again through the Chair. Going back to the page 6 there, Stavros, and I guess my question is also going to be relevant to another item coming up in the agenda, which is the significance and engagement policy. Referring to the Te Aroha vision once again, it says the vision is guided by the words of our ancestor Haumai Tawhiti. 7 strategic themes have arisen, each with its own whangai tawhiti, which is not translated. What is whangai tawhiti?
I'm not sure. It's up to council officers to, if you are wanting translations, then you're welcome to either check for yourself. Māori Dictionary is a fantastic online resource, or ask a translator.
Oh, sorry, in the significance and engagement report coming up, it says that council documents are written in English, so that in Councillor Stavros's department prepared this report, so I thought it would be available in English. Is that
Sorry,
not the policy?
what report are you specifically referring to? Are you still on the environmental strategy?
Well, I am, but I just note that in the significance and engagement policy report, which is coming up, they say that council reports are always written in English.
Yes.
Well, this is not written in English, Your Worship.
There is always, so we are proudly a bilingual city. We're proudly the first bilingual city in the country, which is suitable for a population that has 40% Māori. Council does provide te reo headings. Any Māori words that are used are translated. If it's not translated, it's very likely that that is a name.
It's got lowercase letters, so I'm assuming it's not a name in this case. Is anyone able to translate?
Look, I think we're diving into some detail that's not relevant for the environmental strategy. We will ask staff to provide the translation to you after, if that's okay. So, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the Chair, thank you for your report, Stavros. One thing, this is probably just my knowledge needing to be improved, but I see this as a strategic document, which is the overriding document, which will formulate our going forward for the next 10 years. Where do specific projects, when do we start telling our people what we are doing? We are going to restore the Utahina. We're going to turn Cuido Park into a wetland and urban forest. When are we going to start telling them of all the great things that we're going to achieve in the next 10 years? When does that part come?
As I said earlier, this is intended to be an umbrella statement of intent, statement of outcome. That umbrella has got both aspirational but also high utility purpose. Nothing we can do these days in terms of our core infrastructure strategies can be done without demonstration of compliance with a whole host of regulations, consenting and so on. Therefore, and embodying environmental outcomes and aspirations into our total range of infrastructure programs of work, like the Linton Park, like the Morris Street dams, comprehensive resource consent, for stormwater, which we discussed, early in December. All these sort of things need to be pivoted and need to be linked to an environmental outcome we have there. So, in response to your question, when will the public see all these projects? The public is already seeing these projects. These projects are already in progress at the moment. The projects are in execution phase. And the same way we apply engineering principles about the quantity of water, the volume of water, the intensity of water, the retention capacity of the dam, these are all just numerical engineering data and information. Then we need to gradually demonstrate how we monitoring the effects of these projects into our receiving environment. That's why I say this environmental plan says, well, we need to start, be more systematic about what is the state of environment, how do we measure it, how do we reverse trace it back to its source, and how do we propose mitigation actions to that. So it's going to be an evolving process. But the core of your question is that when we're going to see these projects, you're already seeing them. They're already in our infrastructure strategies. They're already projects you have approved, not just this year, but in previous years. They just incorporate all these elements into their delivery phase.
Thank you for clarifying that. So basically, everything you've referred to as far as the stormwater dams, they were done by the previous council. So if we decide, hey, we'd like to do X, Y, Z, whatever that might be, what you're saying is that all takes years of research, data to back up whether that project is actually worthwhile doing. So technically, we, in our first triennium, won't see anything that we actually decide.
Well, I'll try to be very careful not to navigate into political waters here. As an officer, and I think most of us, we're delivering projects that this council, and I don't mean this elected council, this council has approved. A lot of them are long-term in nature. They are not one-off, stand-off project, but we continue to deliver the programs of work that the various councils, elected bodies have approved into our infrastructure strategy. Now, you might want to, a new council at a political level, you may want to divert something in some different areas, but I would not agree that anything you want to see will come in many years to come. I hope not, because everything we report to you on a progress level or every month, our progress reports, our infrastructure, we have a continuity of a whole range of programs. Now, if you really don't want this project to continue, then you can instruct us to stop them. We don't make these decisions, you make these decisions. If you want to stop something or do something different, again, you can instruct us to do that. But in the absence of a clear instruction to stop a program of work or to do something different, then we assume that our reporting to you enjoys your support. And we'll continue to do them, because in the absence of an alternative, what do you expect that we cannot invent new projects by ourselves? We need to be directed by yourselves.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. And final question from Councillor Kiriopa.
Thank you very much, through the Chair. I'd just like to total the comments made by Councillor Brown. Firstly, that the strategy is a good start. And also the comment that, sorry, before I make my question, I give my question. Also the comment that there needs to be a vision. And this relates to the question actually I've got. For iwi, Papua and iwi, an environment strategy, a climate change strategy, a community well-being strategy, they're all the same thing. And it's difficult when councils choose to silo these things. But regardless of what's happening regionally or nationally in this space, what we believe as hapu is that these sort of strategies need to be at-place strategies. What might work on this side of the lake isn't necessarily going to work on the other side of the lake. What's going to work, what's needed in Rotorua environmentally is not the same as what's needed in Wellington environmentally. So I agree that there needs to be a vision specifically for Rotorua Lakes Council in partnership with our hapu and iwi for this strategy. My question to you, Stavros, is has any consideration or been given towards looking at the environmental strategy and the climate, the Lakes Council climate plan, and incorporating the resourcing and work plan across those?
My apologies if I'm not getting the exact nature of your question, Councillor Kiriopa. But I totally agree with you that a universal application of a particular type of intervention is it's fraught with difficulties, because, as you said, what can work in one area might not necessarily work in something. And so, if your question is that, are we applying engineering, planning, environmental and statutory considerations on the basis of a universal plan or on the basis of a locality specific needs, I would say our various programs of work always have to address the locality specific needs for that, which includes environmental outcomes, climate change. And I think yesterday, for example, we had a protocol meeting with Ngāti Weiwei Hipina with regards to work we do in terms of water tech. Now, the program of work, of course, for you as elected members collectively is that we need to provide Nongodaha and Kotu with reliable sources and healthy water. But in order to understand the impact of that water from, the sources controlled by Ngāti Rangi Waewae, then we need to apply some local solutions, some local mana whenua aspirational elements that will help us collaborate in that respect. So, but that same approach would not apply for in Waipa or in Himo, water supplies or somewhere else. We need to be mindful, and I think we are mindful that every locality has got its unique challenges, unique perspectives, not just at the engineering level, but also from the community that that owns that locality, or the other mana whenua in the locality. Not just mana whenua, the general community. When we consult with the community, we need to get views to incorporate into these programs of work. The program of work that applies into, let's say, in the upper Yudhina catchment, Lindor Park and so on, would not be the same as the program of work going to Rotorua Central, because of different topographical, geological and community aspects to be incorporated into that. We cannot go and build, for example, a large retention dam in the basin in the middle of Glenholm. So we need to manage it in a different way. So we have to talk to that community, understand, what the implications would be. I'm sorry, my apologies, I'm not very clear about, but I think I interpret your question as that, do we apply locality-specific approaches? I hope we do. I think we're doing our best to incorporate that.
Sorry, I know I didn't ask a very clear question. I guess the simple question I was wondering is, do we have the same people working on this environment plan as on that climate plan? Are they across both?
Yes, and the same people who work on our infrastructure strategy. The whole idea is to cross-pollinate all these sort of things, to have one vertical integration of all these principles.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to the final policy to discuss for the supporting information to the long-term plan. That's our asset management policy. Happy to take any questions from councillors regarding this. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Back again, Stavros. Page 7, Sports, Recreation and Environment. What's the total value?
Just double checking, do you mean what's the total financial value?
Yes.
That may be a Thomas question, but that may also be a hard question for them to accurately say on the spot.
Your Worship, that will be a difficult one when you take into account all the assets. We'd have to do a bit of compilation, but you're probably talking hundreds of millions with regards to reserves and sports fields and boat ramps and jetties and toilet, all those sorts of elements. So it is a significant investment.
Okay, thank you. So where does Springfield Golf Course fit in this? Destination parks, green space, which one is it?
Well, the Springfield Golf Course is not an asset. We don't operate a golf course. We don't create that. We own the land.
Yes.
So the underlying land will have a value into it, which, as Thomas said, I can't tell you off my head what is the market value of the Springfield Golf Course, but I heard figures to the tune of $30 million.
Okay.
Or thereabouts.
So going one more question. Page 15, asset life cycle management. There's a table there that has a heading of life cycle stages, and in it states, our optimised decision-making process determines when an asset is no longer required and should be disposed of rather than renewed. Alternatively, the asset may be repurposed to fit a new or emerging community need. So I see that process is defined on page 18, but actually who is involved in the process itself? Who makes these decisions?
That would be council.
No, to some degree.
The final decision to set the direction.
Can I get some clarity there? You know, there's a big difference between disposing the museum because you know, for example, as a building, as a facility, because it reaches end of its useful life. These are major decisions elected members would make. But can I point out to you that the infrastructure alone, which is worth about $2 billion at the moment, it's made up of thousands of different assets, pipes, road markings, signage, you know, asphalt, you know, chip seal, you know, all these bits and pieces. They all have a finite life cycle. And when they come to the end of finite life cycle, we have to make decisions as to, do we replace like we would like? Do we take this pipe that was put into the ground 70 years ago and replace it with the same type of material? Do we repurpose it? Do we duplicate it? These are decisions we make on a day-to-day basis as engineers, you know, and you're employing us as engineers to make these decisions simply because we have the competence to make that decision. What you make decisions is on strategic assets, on big things like the treatment plant, you know, like the museum, like the Sir Howard Morrison, like, you know, big swimming pool. But in terms of the vast majority of the thousands of assets, the people who manage those services there from these assets, they make the decisions on a day-to-day basis. And you agree to the life cycle plan and you allocate depreciation funded, you know, renewals, you allocate growth funded, you know, investment, new investment, and we make these decisions on the basis of what the demand of these assets, you know, of assets would be. So it's not a universal approach, but I would suggest that the majority of the decisions in terms of the asset management policy are made by people on the coal face that, you know, have to make decisions on a day-to-day basis, and because they have the capacity and the skills and the competence to make that decision.
So you're saying that day-to-day business as usual stuff is handled by operational side of the business or of the organisation, but anything on the large scale would come through us as the elected members to make decisions on those. Where would something like our community halls sit?
Well, again, I'll go back to the specific community halls. It's a package of assets. I don't know what the combined value are of my hits. I would, you know, in terms of orthodox asset management plan, questions and multi-criteria assessment have to be assessed to say, well, this community hall comprises many different parts. The walls need repainting, they need reconfiguring, the electrical circuit needs changing, the plumbing system needs to be changed, the air conditioning needs to be changed. Those are decisions made on a day-to-day basis. If a community hall is a decision is required to be made whether a community hall should be there in the first place, I imagine that's a matter of community consultation and ultimately a council decision to be made, you know, onto that. But the management of the assets, the physical assets of the community hall on a day-to-day basis has to be done by the people who manage those community halls as property managers.
Right. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Any further questions? Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you. Maybe just some feedback around just 1.4 assets at a glance, whether that could just be made clearer for the public, so that's the $2.5 billion in assets and value, but then we're saying, but it excludes all these other things, so just that could perhaps be clarified, because we say it includes 3 waters, but it doesn't include detention dams. We say it includes facilities, but not including the value for the Sir Howard, the museum, so just maybe a clarity thing for what we're saying. It's 2.5 billion plus, and it's quite a lot more plus because a lot of the values aren't included in there.
You take that on board, see if it's appropriate to add. Thank you. Just checking if there was any other questions from Councillor Kaifong. Done. Councillor Lee, and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the Chair, Stavros. Page 11 of the asset management policy. In collaboration with Mana Whenua, we embed, I'll say it in English, Te Arawa cultural values framework in the way we manage our infrastructure, safeguarding the life-supporting capacity of air, soil, water and ecosystems. It then goes on to say we co-govern, co-design and manage with Mana Whenua our long-term infrastructure solutions. How does that work?
I believe you had quite a comprehensive answer earlier that explained that very well. Was there any other information that you required?
Well, what is the mechanism of the co-governance is really, and the co-design and the co-management? Is this all happening in the protocol committees or what?
Stavros has already answered it, but if you wish to summarise.
No, in general, Councillor Lee, that the co-governance relates to designing solutions, and especially with Mana Whenua, we generally co-design and co-agree to the operational elements of a particular solution at the resource consent phase, because the important thing is to recognise is that we treat Mana Whenua. If you park aside all our relationship protocols and our obligations to deal with, to manage all these relationships at a higher level, at the baseline, at the very baseline, generally we have to recognize that we're dealing with landowners. And when we enter into someone's land, whether it's a collective multi-owners, Whenua Maori land, which is represented by a hapu and a trust or whatever, it's irrelevant. We do have to demonstrate our ability to work collaboratively with them in order to obtain easements into the land, to place infrastructure, to extract resource, to transmit that resource. So when we say co-design and co-govern, we co-govern and co-design the elements that are required to satisfy a resource consent application and an ongoing relationship, protocol for that. And I think that what we've got in this document here is a draft. I think we made some changes later on to demonstrate that we're appropriate. We don't do that everywhere. We do it where it's necessary.
Is this normal with other councils?
It is. It is normal with any landowner.
Since when? How recent?
Well, I mean, from my experience, I've been in local government for 35 years, and always, was a requirement to work with Mana Whenua in the various forms and various localities that are required, a joint approach to agreeing to a solution in order to get regulatory approaches, regulatory concerns to do some work. So it's nothing new to me, and again, I don't know earlier than that. I wasn't in the country earlier than that, but that's to the best of my knowledge, the last 35 years. That's a normal practice. It's a legislative requirement.
You're referring to consulting with landowners. That's the legislative requirement that you're referring to.
Mana Whenua are really landowners.
I think this has been explained very thoroughly multiple times. We'll move to Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would agree on that wholeheartedly. I've sat here for 18 months and we've had the same questions asked and the same answers have been applied every single time. So I'm getting a little bit fed up with it. Anyway, my question is, we are looking at the asset management policy. How does that inform, or how does it sit with the 30-year infrastructure strategy? Does this asset management policy inform the 30-year infrastructure strategy? Is that how it works? And we will be reviewing the 30-year infrastructure strategy prior to the LTP. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there appear to be no further questions on the asset management policy. So I'll therefore put the recommendations to the vote before we break for our morning tea. So I'll read it out. That Council approve in draft a set of supporting information used to guide the development of the long-term plan 2024-2034 direction, that being the significant forecasting assumptions, the environmental strategy and the asset management policy. And point 3, that Council notes that these supporting documents will be published in conjunction with the long-term plan consultation document following its adoption in March.
Madam Chair, could we please vote on those separately? The A, B and C?
Yes, we are welcome to. So I will take, if I could take point 2, and I'm just thinking what the best way to do that would be. So there may be a bit of copying and pasting in the minutes later, but I'll take it as 2A, 2B, then 2C, and then of course the final point being 3. So may I please have, do I have a mover and a second for all of the motions first and foremost? That's moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Brown. I'll put to the vote point 2A, significant forecasting assumptions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. Could I just ask, are we having discussion before we take the final, before our votes, or are we just going straight into voting? Because we've had questions, but we haven't had.
Would you like some discussion on these items?
Well, sorry, I do have a comment before we go ahead, but I'm happy to wait until.
Sorry,
for your ruling.
I was putting them to the vote, but I am happy to pause for any final comments if anybody has some. And we can start with you, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could I just say I'll be happy to support these. I think the hard work done by our executive team and their various departments is exemplary. I've been very happy with what they've put forward. My only concern moving forward is some of the stuff that isn't in this LTP, some of the big decisions. And for me, that would be looking at, I think even now, we could be looking at things like around water, for example. How do we share, how do we get the message across around what's the cost of water? Now, a very blunt instrument could be just be putting on a water meter or something like that. But as I always say to people who bring that up, when was the last time you turned over your power bill and looked at when you spend and how you spend, and do I change my shower time from morning or afternoon to get the cheapest quality? No one ever looks at it. You just look at the final thing and pay it. So it's not really a tool for conservation. I know that we're waiting on, obviously, the new government to come forward with their proposal, but there are already ideas and all that we should be going out to the public on and saying, well, how do we as a council communicate to you the need to conserve and also pay for current needs but also future needs? A couple of other things. One of the big things that we've brought up is our dependence on either rates or fees and licences. At some point, I mean, we have, from looking at the information provided to us, 3 main assets which basically we can't sell off. Now, assets that have no value, personally, I sort of ask what sort of asset they actually are, let alone future investments in them. But if we just have this ongoing problem of only rates and our fees and licences being our fallback, we're just going to be going through the same thing of another, and next time it's going to be, oh, we need another 14% to get us through this crisis. Or there's going to be another, we need a 15 or a 25 like other councils. Where's the ideas and solutions to go out to the public and say, this is the problem we have, give us your input about how we can address this? So, as I say, I'm very happy to support the hard work done by our teams, but there's a lot there that I think moving forward, and maybe not even decisions for this council, but the following one, I think that those discussions need to start as soon as possible. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Just checking if there were any other items for discussion. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am comfortable with the significant forecasting assumptions. I'm much less comfortable with environmental strategy and the asset management policy. My confidence in the independence of staff reports in the last couple of weeks has been shaken a little, and certainly the environmental strategy looks like it was drafted by the Te Arawa Lakes Trust or something. But so I won't be supporting
Point of order,
those.
Councillor Lee, that is your opinion, but that is misinformation. You have very clearly heard it's been presented by his team, by our council
I did express
staff.
it as an opinion, Your Worship, yes.
Did you have any other comments you wish to make?
No, that's all, thank you.
Thank you. Any other item of discussion points? Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick one. I'd just like to commend the staff on the work that has gone into all three pieces of these works and the significance, I'll say, that they've put into not only the forecasting, but especially for Stavros and Councillor Barker will know as well that we've worked alongside him quite a bit with the environmental strategy and also on the asset management policy, and the focus that they've put on the significant issues in these three pieces of works, not focused on the surface level noise, but actually on the issues, and just like to commend them on this. And also just to point out that our city and our community, our people benefits from a lot of the natural resources that have either been provided through partnership and working together with mana whenua, and that has created the city that we live in today, and it wouldn't be there without the hard work on both sides, the relationship, the managing of that relationship on both sides. So just like to point that out and thank the staff for their work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Councillor Brown.
Through you, Madam Chair, for the record, I got involved with the environmental plan development, and I thought it was deficient because it did not have Te Arawa input in an earlier draft. So I can categorically say that this was not something that was generated by mana whenua. Personally, I think they would have potentially developed a better environmental plan, but I know the person that did write it. She's done a very, very good job, and I commend staff and council to having got to this point.
Thank you. I think we've had some good discussion from both perspectives. Well, Councillor Maxwell will give you the final comment before I put these to the vote.
I'll try and be brief. Yes, I'll support the motions that are here, but during the debate, I can't sit here and say that I've not been impressed with Councillor Lee's constant criticism of Te Arawa and the efforts here, but I didn't want to get into an argument which will become possibly, I hope the media does see and appreciate that this is one person's view. And I did go to talk to him the other day. I said, what do you want to achieve, Councillor Lee? And not once did he tell me that one of the main things that he had there was Ngāti Whakaue Protocol Committee being abolished. 50 years of work on one person's whim. But I didn't want to get into an argument, but at the same time, thank you, Councillor Brown, for adding the comments you did too. Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. We are wrapping up. Would you like to respond to the comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to respond to Councillor Maxwell's comments. Apparently it's not clear, but the nature of my concerns are that the evidence has emerged from minutes in the recent weeks that not only are decisions being made by protocol committees, staff are reporting on them, they're acting on them, and it's a group of unelected people, basically the board of the Pukeroa Trust, who are making decisions, and they're not elected and they're not politically accountable to do so.
I've
So
allowed
it's a
you
democracy
to respond.
issue.
because he has personally raised that with you, but I would like to confirm that decisions are not being made there. Decisions are made at our councils or our committees. I refer to the Lakeland Queen example in particular. That was sent on a council letterhead, not on the committee of the protocol. So I think we've had very good discussion. We are, as a reminder, talking about significant supporting information for the long-term plan. So we'll get back to topic.
Point of order.
What is your point of order?
Misrepresentation. The minutes of the Ngāti Whakaui Gifted Reserves Protocol Committee record that the decision was made in that committee to ask the Lakeland Queen to be removed from Sulphur Point. The council staff acted on that decision and when Rob Pitcairnley wrote to the Lakeland Queen owner.
Thank you. That is a consultative process. That is not a decision of council. As you have rightly said, it was a council staff member who then went to follow up on that. So they do not have decision-making abilities of the protocols. I think we have covered this very well. If you wish to seek further advice or information from staff, then you are welcome to do so. So welcome, Councillor Waru. We have noted your apologies for lateness. And just to give you a brief update, what we're going to do, we are on agenda item on page 20, and we're going to take the recommendations in separate order for the three different documents. So we'll do 2.A, significant forecasting assumptions, 2B, environmental strategy, and then 2C, asset management policy. We have had a mover and a seconder for that, so I will now take them and put them to the vote. All those in favour to support significant forecasting assumptions, please say aye. Any against? That is carried. All those in favour to support B, environmental strategy, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That is carried. All those in favour to support asset management policy, please say aye. Any against? That is carried. Thank you. And we have the final point 3, that council notes that the supporting documents will be published in conjunction with the long-term plan consultation document following its adoption in March. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you very much. We will now break for a short morning tea. I'd like to take 18 minutes. If we could please return back at 11:30.
Madam Chair, just a division on that vote, please.
Pardon?
Can the votes be recorded, please? A division is called.
If you could please call that, technically you're supposed to call that straight away, but if you would like your vote recorded against, then we can do so.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just couldn't get in there without interrupting you. My apologies.
That's okay. Thank you. And just a reminder, councillors, technically you call it straight away if you can, please, if you would like that voted against. So we'll take a short break and we will see you again at 11:30. Everyone, and welcome back to our meeting. Thank you very much for that short break. We will now be going into the long-term plan significance and engagement policy before then discussing the following items of going for housing growth and the business case request for travel costs to Taiwan. So I'd now like to ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report, Long-Term Plan 2024-2034, Significance and Engagement Policy Decision Making be received. It's moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour to receive this, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. And I'd like to now invite Greg and also Una to overview this report and speak to a presentation that they have.
Welcome back, councillors. So staying with the theme of the long-term plan, you will recall that towards the end of last year, we came to you with a couple of revisions on the existing significance and engagement policy and asked for you to adopt that draft and go out for consultation. The reason we have gone out prior to the LTP with this is that the policy in itself, having been revised and hopefully adopted, then sets that framework for how we can undertake engagement in the long-term plan. We're going to do a bit of a tag team here today. We've got a short presentation just to remind everybody about the intent of the significance and engagement policy and to cover off the feedback that had been received during that consultation time and then to take any questions at the end. So I'm going to hand over to Greg first and we'll go from there.
Good morning, Your Worship. Good morning, elected members. Thank you very much. I just quickly thought it would be a good opportunity to run through what a significance and engagement policy is and then touch on what we got from consultation. So it is a requirement under the Section 76AA of the Local Government Act. And what it does is it enables council to assess how significant particular issues, proposals, assets and activities are and the level of community engagement that is required. It makes it clear, well, the policy makes it clear about when the council will engage and how it may engage, so that significant decisions can be made alongside the community. It provides a guide that outlines the engagement principles that will be followed when engaging with the community. So transparency, building relationships and community capacity, inclusiveness and equity, and Māori participation. We review this policy every 3 years in the lead up to the long-term plan, and the aim is to have this policy reviewed and any changes made before consultation of the long-term plan, as Una said. So this review was done in line with best practices and ensures that the policy remains relevant, responsive and effective in guiding the Council's approach to community involvement. Proposed changes focus on enhancing clarity rather than the significant deviation from the original intent. Consultation was conducted between the 1st of November and the 30th of November 23. We had information set up at the library and the customer centre. We sent out stakeholder emails to community groups and asked them to share that with their communities. We also included it in the e-Pānui, which was sent to about 1,400 recipients. It was also shared across RLC's social platforms. We also met as part of existing meetings, which is something that we're trying to do as an engagement team with Tātou Pounamu, Multicultural Settlement Network, community boards, Te Tātou, Te Pukenga Koeke o Ngāti Whakaue, Te Reo Irirangi o Te Arawa, and the Rotorua Primary School. We received 21 submissions. So sorry, just to clarify on that number, we had 23 submissions of 21 submitters. No definitive opposition to the draft policy, and there was an opportunity for submitters to highlight their thoughts, which is what we got. So we've grouped them into a number of themes that came through, which was modes of preferred communication, general issues that participants wanted to address, language and accessibility, council processes, and other general recommendations. So our recommendation this morning is that Council adopt the significance and engagement policy for 2024 on the back of that feedback.
Thank you. Just before going into any questions, I just want to go back to the feedback that we received from the submitters and just clarify on that there was no definitive opposition to the draft policy, but the feedback we got, there is a lot of good feedback in there that the teams within council can take on board for how we might do things. And some really good suggestions for additional ways that the community wish to see us consult, how often, that type of stuff. Those specific things do not need to be included in the actual policy itself. They become I guess, the way that we then use the policy. So hence, I just wanted to make that clear between the difference between the policy, which does set that level of significance and sort of when to engage, but a lot of the feedback we were receiving was about how we engage. So two different things there, but some equally and really relevant good feedback, we believe. So happy to take any questions on the policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kiriopa.
Thank you very much. I see that can we go back to the slide where you've highlighted Te Puking o Koike o Taurua and Te Tatau o Taurua as you've met with them as part of the existing meetings. In the Te Tatau submission, they've highlighted that they were excluded from any workshops, discussions and processes in conflict with the Te Taurua Partnership Agreement signed in 2015. How does that align if we're saying that we've met with them as part of the existing meetings?
So we did a review as a team within our organisation based on best practice and looking at how other councils do things. We did then go and have a meeting with Te Tato and other entities as well, and highlighted what changes have been made and requested that submissions get made on this policy. So that is, I think, where the difference is coming in.
Sorry, I've got a couple more questions, so it's all right. So in terms of other entities as well, you're meaning Te Puking o Koike o Taurua. Who didn't make a submission? It seems that Te Tatau o Taurua, who is not a hapu or iwi, by the way, was the only committee with any Māori interest at all, or anything to do with Māori that made a submission. Based on that, how has RLC ensured a Te Aroha perspective and input into the identification of methods for assessing significance to Māori, mana whenua and taurahere?
Through you, Madam Chair, so we actually need to go right back to the very beginning when this policy was drafted. So at the time it did have input from staff who were in connections with different Te Aroha and hapu group. Remembering also that the policy was also created using best practice, so a number of councils all collectively worked on a template, which is something quite unique for local government, because local government do have a tendency to, even though everybody has to have a significance and engagement policy, there is always the singular council go off and do their own individual thing. This was actually, back in 2014, a really good piece of collaborations across councils on how to develop this. Over the iterations of this policy, we've worked really closely with Te Tato over different iterations of it to ensure that the framework exists. So again, I'll just say this policy doesn't set exactly how you engage. It provides that when do you need to engage based on the significance of an item.
One further question, thank you. Just like to highlight that council employees who whakapapa Māori may or may not have the interest, capability or capacity to support the best interests of Te Aroha whānau hapu and iwi. And given that Te Tatau o Taurua was mandated as the Te Aroha partner to RLC and is made up of elected members representing multiple Te Aroha sectors including rangatahi, koeke, land trusts, hapu, iwi and pan tribal entities, would it not be appropriate for Te Tato to be utilised to actively support RLC to identify potential and likely impacts to Te Aroha and engagement processes?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I believe they are. Again, I think you're getting into the how do we engage rather than the policy which states what the level of significance going into engagement. And I think you've just heard today, if I go back to Stavros talking about all the different projects that he's involved in, multiple pieces of work connect with mana whenua and a range of different iwi entities on projects, on a project by project or piece of work by piece of work.
Can I make one final comment, please? The fact that Te Tato were the only one to engage in this, I think if that doesn't indicate an issue with RLC engagement with Te Aroha and Mātāwaka, then I don't know what possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. I do note that the submissions and the amount of engagement and feedback that we had was substantially more than what other councils are experiencing with the significant engagement policies. So perhaps it may also just be that this is not, well, because we're not discussing the how yet, it may not be as topical for them, although very important for us. We take the next question to Councillor O'Brien, followed by Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be very brief. Through the Chair. Thank you, Una. Thank you, Greg, for your work. Una, sorry, I'm going to dive off slightly into the how. Could I just, putting my accessibility hat on, these are very significant volumes of work and also quite technical in some aspects. Could I just ask moving forward that we think also too of those with either learning or comprehension issues about how you will have such a voluminous work with many attachments, etc., to perhaps those in the community who may struggle on that sort of level and struggle for support to have that expressed to them. So thank you. Sorry, slight drive off into the how, but it is, sorry, just something moving forward. Thank you both. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell, followed by Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Just going on further, Una, these were groups you met with at their regular monthly meetings or whatever, you met with them. And so when you talk to Te Tato or the Pukenga, you actually had their committee there to be able to express with you. Is that what I get?
So while we went to Te Tato and Multicultural Settlement Network Community Board meetings that were in existence, we did meet with Te Tato and Te Pukenga in separate forums. And so while there were maybe not a full collective of the committee there were attendees and people there from those committees. So they weren't held at a specific meeting of Te Tato, for example. We actually went across to those offices and had a meeting with them.
I'm aware that and Te Tato have presented to us in one of our own meetings, and that at times I know they've expressed disappointment that this term, they're not part of some of the discussions that they were able to be part of. And I think that's part of their frustration as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just for the benefit of those who may be watching or listening and don't really understand the significance of the significance and engagement policy, particularly the fact that this is the way that they deal with us and we deal with them. It's one of the cornerstones of how councils operate. So there's one particular point that maybe a question could be clarified, is who determines whether something is significant or not? If you have a look at our agenda today, there are a number of examples of this is determined to be significant and then there is this is not. Who makes that decision?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. We have to actually break that down into a number of different categories. Engagement is a huge continuum from just sharing information to actually collaboration. In the middle there's a whole raft of different ways that you can engage with the community. To break that down, then council are legislated to consult on a number of significant things. For example, the long-term plan, bylaws and some policies. So those pieces of work have to come and a council decision is made to present material and information in the form of a consultation document and go out for a period of time and ask for feedback. Generally, that's a month. There are then a number of other pieces of work which you are likely as a council to make a decision that these are going ahead or as a proposal. Let's use the museum, for example, and the council would make the decision that before they can make a decision on go or no go, the council would go out and consult and get an understanding from the community as to what the community's view is on that. And all of that helps to determine and guide your decision making. There are a number of other not so significant pieces of work where we are required under the Local Government Act as officers to present to the council a consideration on the level of significance and present that to you in the reports that come to you, of which you will make a decision. But those assessments are made using the significance and engagement policy for the officer then to provide a recommendation to the council and you will make the decision.
Thank you.
Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question for clarification, probably just in relation to any consultation that we do. In some instances, the public can speak to these submissions, and in this instance, they're not, and we're asked to make a decision based on a summary of the feedback. But I think, is there an expectation from some of the members of the public that made submissions that they would be making submissions, given that they were asked how they would like to present their views in this decision-making process?
In this instance, we didn't advertise or say hearings are available. We also didn't have, I'm just checking, people actually request to be heard. There is an ongoing conversation, I guess, around hearings versus not hearings. And it comes down to how people like to communicate with the council. And there are a number of different ways that the community can engage with the council. In this instance, as part of the engagement plan, we had produced that engagement plan more on a face-to-face and getting feedback from various groups that way, information being sent out, and the use of digital portals such as the Let's Talk to gain feedback.
Okay, thank you. I think probably just for me it would just be a clarification for the public so that there is no misunderstanding as to whether or not they do have an opportunity, because I read the online sort of feedback as some submitters were thinking that they did have that opportunity.
Thank you. Were there any further questions? There appear to be none, so I'll take a mover and a seconder and then open up for any discussion. May I please have a mover and a seconder? I'll read it out. That the committee note the community feedback arising from the consultation process and that council adopt the significance and engagement policy. It's moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Waru. We now open for any discussion on this. There appears to be none. Yes, Councillor Waru.
Just a quick comment, just around the feedback. It's not a question, just a matter of just asking. You know, we're adopting this policy right now. I would hope that some of that feedback in the upcoming months might somehow be injected into the policy as it stands now. I'm not too sure how that would work, but you know, it's good to say we note the feedback, but for those who have submitted, what does that actually come to? So it'd just be good to know that that's actually something we're going to hold on to and take into consideration as we still, you know, these things ain't set in stone. We can still look at them as we go on. That's my understanding. So I think, keep an open mind like that. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Kiriopa.
Thank you. I just want to highlight that Lakes Council's seeming reliance on staff members with te arawa whakapapa to be making some of these decisions is not what's required within within government policy or requirements that Gina gratefully. Are you pointing at me because this is off? That Gina highlighted at the start of our terms, and I think that's what we might need a refresh on that with some of the questions that are coming. What's the actual obligations of council in terms of enablement of iwi engagement in these types of policies and support to engage in decision making around them. And I just want to highlight that there seems to be a heavy reliance on staff with te arawa whakapapa who, in the first instance, it's a job. They can't be expected to make those sorts of decisions around significance. There is a requirement for council to enable hapu and iwi engagement and decision making around these sorts of things. Thank you.
Thank you. As we are in debate, we wouldn't usually get staff to respond, but given that you're raising concern about staff, I'll just ask our interim chief executive to provide a response.
It's a really well-made point, but I would add to it though that it's not the whakapapa of staff, that it's their role description and what they've been appointed to do. So it would be inappropriate to simply ask a staff member who happens to be Māori to provide advice, and we don't do that. What we do is we seek advice from people who are employed specifically for that particular pukenga, that particular expertise. That also does not take away from council's obligations to engage proactively with te arawa around matters of significance. When you receive your reports, there is always a statement around our assessment as staff around how the significance and engagement policy has been assessed, and it is appropriate for elected members to challenge or raise questions as to how we've made that assessment.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to tautoko Councillor Waru's comments. I've been in the other side of this, sitting over there presenting to a council previously and making submissions, and basically they just get ignored. It's really discouraging for people to get involved in the process, and then it's just like that gets put in a file in a box and never referred to again. So I think we can do better when we do our consulting, when it comes to listening to what people have to say. And if we want to do what it set out at the beginning of the year of our priorities to be authentic, then perhaps we need to take those 21 comments from 23 submitters, or 23 submitters and their 21 comments, and just go, thank you very much, and we will endeavour to take on board what you have said and try and involve it somehow. It seems like the process, this is where we make the decision, we adopt the policy, and then it stops. Can we make this a living document? Can we make it evolve through us implementing these new strategies and learning, well, hang on, we could do that one better, and tweak it a bit? Does it always have to be set in stone once we make the decision? That's what I'm getting at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson, and it is very pleasing that this new council had set a priority, as you correctly say, to have authentic communication and engagement. So it is wonderful to see that priority around the table, and also, of course, to support our staff who endeavour to achieve that all the time. So thank you very much. There appears to be, you have a final comment from Councillor Maxwell, then we'll put this to the vote.
Just asking the process. So we've received 21 submissions, but this is still going out for consultation in April, and people, what's that one? I Hopefully I haven't got it all confused.
Thank you. We have just had an update on the consultation and the submissions that we received from it, so we have already been out for consultation. Now's the opportunity for us to adopt the policy as it is, that we will then use for the long-term plan consultation document.
And in April, we were told last year, we're going out for a month's consultation on what? Una?
So at the end of March, we adopt our consultation document for the long-term plan. That will then be out for consultation before we make a final decision. So the documents we've been discussing today are the supporting documents that allow or set the process in place, and of course, the key policies to then be consulted on. So I think we'll leave that there. We have already got a mover and a seconder. I have read it out. I'd like to now put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? And one abstention. Thank you. That has been carried. So, okay. So division is just to check. If you would like your vote recorded, you just ask, may my vote be recorded? If a division means that everybody has to vote again and we have to raise our hands, yeah, so it's visibly. So would you like a division or would you like your vote recorded? Thank you. So that was against from Councillor Kiriopa and abstained from Councillor Lee. So we now move into our next report, going for housing.
Sorry, Madam Chair, if you'd just indulge me, just one quick question while we're still on that, kaupapa.
Yep.
It's my understanding, and maybe you can confirm for me, please, Una, that these policies, we have to have them in place before we do the long-term plan. It's actually in the Act, right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I now would like a mover and a seconder to receive the report going for housing growth next steps. That's moved from Councillor Kaifong, seconded by Councillor Brown. I put that to the vote to receive it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Jean-Paul Gaston to overview the report.
Good morning, everyone. This report's got kind of two purposes. One is just to look at where we currently are on our urban planning and our planning approach post the adoption of the future development strategy against what's been talked about from central government. So where they see increased flexibility options or a focus on supporting growth through infrastructure. So it's really important, we thought, before you start receiving back the recommendations from the commissioners on Plan Change 9, just to give some context about where we think the government is starting to look. That's one purpose. The second purpose was just probably to give an opportunity to Her Worship just to report back on a meeting that was held with the two new ministers related to housing before Christmas and the sort of steps leading out of that. So at the moment, obviously, government has been focusing on the coalition agreement in the first 100 days. We'll see now some of the key policies starting to roll out, but what I wanted to sort of bring to this table was a view that actually we're extremely well placed to respond to what's being talked about through government about supporting growth, making available or focusing on infrastructure enablement, but equally and probably importantly too, making it easier to get consents or avoid consent, so that regulatory framework. So that's kind of the approach I thought I'd just go through today. So there's a lot of background in the report, but I've got a couple of quick slides I thought I'd just traverse, and then if Her Worship's okay, I can hand her across to her to talk about the discussions with those ministers. So, councillors, this is a long process, and I've heard discussions today about things like previous council's decisions. They do start a long time and they do go over different council terms. Some of that is directed, and Councillor O'Brien highlighted we have national policy statements every which way, and so one of the big drivers for us was the national policy statement on urban development. So you know I've repeated that many times, and really we're just working through those key steps here. So if you look at the diagram I've tried to put in place, I like my diagrams, so hopefully everyone else can work their way through them. Our housing and business assessment was done in 2021. And for us, that was an important requirement of that national policy statement to quantify whether we had sufficient housing land availability or housing capacity, and equally business capacity, but I'll focus on the housing stuff. So from that, we identified a number of key issues for us. We had a shortfall, and that shortfall and deficiency in housing capacity was likely to extend not only from the short term, but to the medium term and the long term. So our plan-enabled housing capacity was not sufficient. In addition to that, we also had something called the missing middle. So our district plan was set up to provide a reasonably large section with a reasonably centred house. Single house. So that's what our district plan was set up to do. So, and it really didn't change significantly over the last couple of decades, where other councils have been forced to respond to growth and looking at some of those other housing types, we haven't. So we stayed very much the same, largely driven by a lack of growth. So where others have responded and changed their rules, we didn't. So that really left us in a situation where some of those other housing types are not easy to put onto a site because of our consenting requirements in our district plan. Now that deficiency and obviously problems with types of homes, particularly affordable ones or different size, led to the previous council asking that government consider us for inclusion around the medium density residential standards. Obviously that was a trade-off because it's a suite of standards. You don't get to pick which ones you like and which ones you don't. You have to take them all. So the trade-off there was to get the enablement of the MDRS immediately. So that came operative, and in my apologies, I've got a date wrong in the report, August 2022. So it's been in place now for a year and a half. So that gives us this package of standards. And one of the reasons why we thought it gave us a pathway through consenting directly to building consent when you operate within those standards. So that was done outside of our normal plan change processes, and hence my diagram showing it up there at the top, sort of outside of it. It was done through an OIC, an Order in Council, which was a parliamentary process. So that's how we were included. Those performance standards are in place and operative and have been since August 2022. They are anticipated now because they were in place and within our future development strategy, but also included within Plan Change 9. So those standards which sit outside of our district plan through Plan Change 9 are being brought in as rules into our district plan. That's important because it also starts addressing some of the inconsistencies. So whilst they're a package of standards and they sit outside, once you get inside our district plan, if there's a variation against those standards, you instantly go to a resource consent process. So it's a bit of a clumsy mix. So bringing them inside the district plan makes them operative rules to be assessed. The other part of it is QMs, qualifying matters. So that also starts saying where they don't apply. So where there's flooding risk or where it's adjacent to a marae or in other areas, those are the issues where the MDRS can't apply. The PC9 also includes a whole host of other improvements, clarity around apartment size, enablement of housing within the CBD and commercial zones, and most importantly probably, and it was highlighted again in the protocol meeting yesterday, the value of the Papakainga rule changes. So really important things. So PC9 will be coming to you for decisions based on those commissioners' recommendations in mid-February. So what I've shown there is also, and it was raised by Councillor Kai Fong earlier, the FDS estimates that the potential reasonably expected to be realised, which is one of the key criteria of the HBA, estimate, so it's an estimate, has risen from about 6,100 or up to 12,400. So that gives us a significant margin across the 30 years because of the complexity of our housing environment. We've got a lot of constraints, flooding, geotech and land ownership, which makes it challenging for us to see development with certainty. So that gives us an additional margin with which to consider sufficient capacity. So our sufficient capacity based on the HBA 2021 was we needed a capacity for 9,740 homes. So that's the number we're working off. So just as far as the process is concerned, obviously in February, and I've marked that as the bubble, those recommendations will come back to you for your decisions around PC9. Outside of that, and we'll traverse back to it, is the government's approach. If you look at the Going for Growth policy document that was put together by the National Party prior to the election, which probably will be carried forward into the Minister's delivery of the new Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, is the opportunity to engage around targets for growth. And with that comes the opportunity also to start traversing additional infrastructural funding. So again, really important from a government perspective that there's 30 years of capacity for housing available immediately, I think is the wording that's picked up in the report I've highlighted, and that ability to support and enable consenting and housing development, and hence also the targets that come forward and the infrastructural incentives to go with it. Now, at the moment, those two pieces are estimates. So depending on your decisions around PC9, we've got the opportunity, obviously, to engage government around housing targets and that potential for infrastructural funding. But equally, we're due for a review of our housing and business assessment. So whilst we had this assessment done in 2021, the world has changed, growth has changed. We need to reset that and reevaluate what that capacity is based on what was identified in the Future Development Strategy and your decisions around Plan Change 9. At that point, you can see there, we've got the opportunity to confirm whether we actually have in place at this time the sufficiency of 30-year sufficiency that government has seen as an important target. We're also in a position to say, look, we have or haven't brought MDRS through into our operative district plan to make consenting easy and simple. And equally then we can also have the opportunity to say, actually, we're actually keen on exploring the flexibility being offered by what's being discussed by the government, which is we could exit the MDRS as a package in a separate piece and actually start looking at our own operative district plan to say, as we move forward, we could modify some of those standards if we chose to, or as we start looking at centres development. So there's an opportunity there to say, we've got our capacity in place, we've got our easy consenting in place, we're now keen to explore the flexibility and bring that into future plan changes. So that was really, I think, important for us to say, look, there's a couple of key steps here, your decision making and our evaluation of that capacity before we proceed in any further steps. But at this stage, it looks like we're well set up to align ourselves with what's been discussed in central government. And Your Worship, maybe at that point it might be worth just traversing the ministerial meeting late last year.
Thank you. And so from a political perspective, our new Minister for Infrastructure and Minister for Housing, the Honourable Chris Bishop, was doing a visit to town alongside, obviously, our local MP and Minister Todd McLeay. And that also included Minister Tama Pōtaka, who's the Associate Minister of Housing. So as they were in town, they requested a meeting with myself as Mayor, which was a very good and nice opportunity to touch base with them and also share some initial concerns that our Rotorua community has and any opportunities to work together collaboratively. So following on from that meeting at the end of last year, I also sent a letter that I'd like to table and pass to you all as well, which basically summarises the key issues that we discussed together. So if I can cover those just very briefly for your information. I mentioned a few key topics on how we can work together to deliver better housing solutions for the people of Rotorua. So these will be of no surprise to you. These are items that we have been trying to tackle ourselves as councillors, and certainly what we have heard strong feedback from our community. So they were areas like the shared commitment to end the use of emergency housing motels in Rotorua, There was also the request that government agencies support the city's reputation as a leading tourism destination by ensuring tourism accommodation is used appropriately and recommending some actions to support that. And also that council is supportive of the housing performance incentives for council, which JP touches on in this report, outlined in National's Going for Housing Growth Plan. And so what you will see in one of the recommendations here is to, let me flip to it, is for the council to discuss and decide for me to continue to write to the minister seeking to progress the housing targets agreement. So I'm signalling that we will be supportive, but this is the opportunity for us to put a shared outcome on the table to try to achieve together. The other remaining two items that I raised was where there are kainga order or government agency build programs, ensuring only locals are placed in Rotorua homes and that appropriate wraparound services and tenant management is in place. And finally, providing local community housing providers with an opportunity to grow, and specifically mentioning what Council had also decided on last year around the Council's pensioner housing portfolio, and requesting, which we have already sent the Minister, to approve an allocation of income-related rent subsidy for pensioner housing units, which would be a very helpful solution that I know other councils are also seeking to enable councils to be able to receive that income subsidy, therefore making it more affordable for pensioners. So those are the main items that I've raised in this letter as a follow-up to the discussion, and I did also attach for the Minister's information just some key, a two-pager on the key background items on housing, which we are very familiar with. So that is just a start. We've started that relationship with the new ministers. They seemed very open. They were certainly listening, I felt, authentically, and they were very agreeable that we should be finding some shared outcomes to work towards together. So we don't know what that will look like yet, but part of the recommendation today, as I mentioned, is to try get some certainty by progressing with housing targets agreements. Did you have anything else, JP? So perhaps at this stage, we'll open up for any questions on this agenda item. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, JP, for your report. Just got a question on page 35. You referred to it a couple of times there. FDS and housing capacity. There's a statement there that says, it is prudent to complete the 2024 HBA assessment before confirming this sufficiency. This will be the appropriate time to consider opting out of MDRS. So when in 2024 would that be the appropriate time to consider that?
Through your worship, we're starting to just confirm the scope for the review. So we are targeting the third and fourth quarter of this calendar year. So first 2 quarters of the next financial year to complete that piece of work.
Excellent, thank you. And one more question, just regarding the $1 billion fund that the government has raised as a bit of a carrot for us. How many councils will be vying for that chunk of that fund? So we'll be competing with Auckland?
I think the important thing, which actually is traversed in the government's policy document, or sorry, the National Party's policy document, is it's based on averages or rolling averages of consented homes or homes completed across the last 5 years. So I think in the actual paper it does reference something like Tauranga, which has had significant growth for an extended period. So remember, it's above that average. So actually it's more likely to be of benefit to those territorial authorities where there's been a steady growth over time, and I would have said that we're well placed to receive some of that funding, because if you recall some of my operational reports, we had a very low starting base for housing numbers. So when you start looking at our rolling figures, actually our average is now and has been at a much higher level than it was previously. So I think we would have, and you're right, competing with other territorial local authorities, but our consent numbers are probably well above their average for the last 5 years.
So you're saying we've got a chance of getting a chunk of it?
And that's probably why Her Worship is, having taken this opportunity to meet with the ministers before Christmas, is keen to progress this as rapidly as possible. It is a really good opportunity for us. And I think my next progress report you'll see, and I actually might just make sure I've got a slide there to show you the changes in our numbers of completed homes across the last 10 years, but certainly the last 5 years you'll see those figures.
Well, I guess we've got a good history of that, got 80-something million from the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, so we've got some track record of doing so. Good luck.
Thank you. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, just a question for you. I'm signalling that I'm happy to move the recommendation of that, noting the balanced approach to the delivery of the housing. But just a question for Your Worship, just given that I was also part of that meeting with the ministers, the letter that you've also written indicates that we're already supportive of the housing performance incentives and been included in the supportive of the build target. So probably the second recommendation is probably redundant now. So we've already signalled that we are happy to support those build targets, and also that just follows on from Councillor Patterson's question that effectively if we sign up to get those build targets and based on our numbers, then we will be in the front running or amongst the front runners for that funding. So I'm just signalling that, Your Worship.
And I suppose that I'd seek the thoughts of the council on whether you thought it was appropriate. I suppose the key difference is I've signalled in the letter that council is supportive, and whether or not we felt that we wanted officially to progress a housing targets agreement. So technically we could continue this discussion without that recommendation required, but it's just there for council to be able to have a discussion about. Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, we should just got another point jumped into my mind. This target that we're setting, is that for private developers or does that include Kāinga Ora builds as well?
Look, I think there's a nuance in there for the government policy people who get hold of this to make some decision. My assumption is it's all homes being completed. So one of the challenges that often is yes, there's some homes that are being built by Kāinga Ora through its own consenting pathway, and we give you those different splits of that information we receive from them. But equally, there are private developers who seek consents through us that have subsequent deals or on sell to Kāinga Ora. So I think that's a nuance that's potentially something that the policy people would need to talk about. My assumption is it's homes being built.
Thank you.
Councillor Kaifong, you had further question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, because we do have the decision around the PC9 decision making coming to the Community and District Development Committee on the 14th of February, and actually that is the last piece of the puzzle in terms of providing the sufficiency of zoning for housing. And I was just wondering, given that we need to have all the pieces of the puzzle together before we then go back to the government, whether we should then be looking at what the arrangement or the notification or the discussions that we want to have with the government are all wrapped up together with all of the pieces of puzzle together, given that we'll have the FDS will be starting work on a new HBA, we'll have hopefully signed off PC9, and JP will then get the opportunity to explain how we can then look at those modifications around MDRS and get what we want in terms of those standards, protecting those bits that we do want out of those standards. So I think if we could do that piece of work at that point, it would mean that all the pieces are all together. So it was just a question for you, JP, or Your Worship.
Your Worship, I think the key here is that we signalled our interest. It's probably something that won't happen within a month. So I think we've got time to see the decision making coming out of Plan Change 9. I think at that point we should be reasonably confident that we've got a picture of whether we are in a position to sign up some targets. We would have confirmed that enablement. We would have enabled more homes to be built in the commercial zones in the CBD, and we would have enabled papakainga. So I think some of that point is probably the point where we've got the confidence to say, yes, we're confident we can sign up to targets. My perspective would be to really understand the option of opting out of the MDRS and then giving us back the opportunity to modify it subsequently. If I was a government, I would be expecting us to prove through our updated HBA that we have that 30-year capacity in place. And so that's really that sort of second or third and fourth quarter of this financial year. So I think there's two steps in there. I think you're right that we do the PC9 decisions. We know what our picture is at that point. We're then probably in a confident place to say we could probably sign up to some targets, but actually the sufficiency around opting out or have we got a 30-year capacity in place at that point will be based on that HBA decision or assessment.
Thank you. And also in the letter I have suggested that we meet again either with the ministers or the officials to progress work promptly. Have not had a response yet on that date, but we will be trying to secure one as soon as possible. I do think you are correct. It would be most helpful to have all of that work completed so that we are putting forward the best solution and having that discussion once and hopefully locking into, again, some agreed outcomes or programs. But I don't anticipate that that will happen within the next month. We will keep councillors updated on when we manage to, what the next steps are in terms of discussions with ministers and the government. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te manukura. Kia ora, JP. Thank you for your presentation. I think I'm pretty up to date around the building side of things, numbers wise. Just wondering, has there been any korero around, within your connections or maybe even the mayor's connections around how to tackle the problem of the rents, the costs of living, and is it going hand in hand with the builds?
Maybe I'll start off. I suppose one of the things that's really important is supply. I think that's been evidenced in a number of other localities. So Ministry of Housing and Urban Development do have some quite clear information about where supply has been effectively delivered and how it's stabilised rents. It never kind of leads to a decrease from places like Christchurch and Auckland particularly, but it does lead to that slowing down of rent increases. And obviously ours has been extremely pronounced and actually has been running faster than the national average for a number of years, which reflects our supply issues. And it does highlight some of the pressures that we're seeing as a community. Our housing register is reflective of that, those who are registered on the housing register. And equally, as many of you will have known personally through discussions with members of the community, the pressure it puts on older people, particularly those on a fixed income who are renting and seeing that escalation. I think it was 3 years ago, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development highlighted 650 pensioners who they evaluated as being in housing distress, where a significant portion of their benefit was going on rent. That's probably got worse, and I would certainly hope they were sitting on our housing register. I think, Your Worship, on that issue, you've highlighted one of the key concerns that was raised earlier about making sure our housing program aligns to delivery for locals, because we're under so much pressure for those who are sitting on the housing register and equally those sitting in emergency housing. And that's an important piece to raise at a ministerial level, but also to see operationalised by the relevant agencies. So I think the discussion we had quite a bit earlier in the meeting is really relevant.
Thank you. And this council has also already had the discussion around the only housing that we do have a portfolio on, which is in the pensioner housing. At that time, I did request of the Minister to look at the allocation of income-related rent subsidy, and I have followed that up again with my discussions with him in person and, of course, the letter. So we will continue to do that. We do appreciate it at very challenging times for many in our community.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Te Manukura. Thank you, JP. I only bring it up because you know, we can build all the homes we like, but if our own people can't afford to actually be in them, then it sort of defeats the purpose. So I would like to think that there's a alignment somewhere with the new government and their direction, and we stay abreast of it. So kia ora, tēnā.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On that note, I wonder whether the discussion around immigration numbers comes into it, because they have a direct effect on rents primarily initially. Poking 120,000 people into the country requires us to build a new Dunedin and the houses that go with it. So I just wonder whether in your discussions with the Minister of Housing, immigration became a topic of conversation.
Thank you, and you have raised something that we haven't looked into specifically, although happy to provide a balance on that. Of course, there are many people immigrating to Rotorua and also New Zealand that bring the specialist skills, so that we are very short of. So it is always a balance, but we will be mindful of that. Thank you very much for raising that. There appear to be no further questions, so I can take a mover and a seconder and open up for discussion. Sorry, yes, moved by Deputy Kai Fong, seconded by Councillor Brown, and I'll just open up if there are any items for discussion. Thank you very much, Jean-Paul.
Yes, I just signalled that I didn't think that we needed option 3, so I was happy to move that we just noted the approach to our housing requirements. And
thank you. So perhaps
I was just checking that Councillor Brown was, if he was aware that that was what I was signalling before.
And perhaps what I can suggest is if and when there comes a time for me to discuss the details of progressing a housing targets agreement, I can bring it back to the council or potentially the community and district development community at that stage for councillors to discuss. We don't have anything to discuss here other than asking them to have the discussion. So I see that that's been supported by the mover and the seconder, so we will remove 3, please. Thank you. So we have had a mover and a seconder. Is there any discussion on this item before we put it to the vote? Councillor Kai Fong.
Just as the mover, thank you, Chair. I think what this does is it brings into our thinking and our processes now what the thinking is with the new government, and that's been a question that the councils have been asking frequently up to the point of the election as to, you know, what does the new government think they're going to be doing and how that's going to be implemented. So I think that this is, as I said before, just a part of that puzzle. We will have the opportunity to discuss the next stages going forward, and obviously there is the opportunity just to look at, you know, when we get to the point of signing off PC9, which I'm hoping that we do, that we will have actually done a significant amount of work to progress what is the new government's targets and direction in terms of enabling housing for Rotorua, which will go a long way to addressing those issues of rent and housing supply. And that council should probably congratulate themselves in that we have done a substantial amount of work in signing off that future development strategy. The government had signalled that if we did not have 30 years worth of zoned capacity, then we would be required to have 30 years worth of infrastructure enabled greenfield development, and that just would not be realistic for Rotorua in terms of its topography and also the cost to the Rotorua community to be putting pipes to potential subdivisions which we don't know whether or not they would be developed. So I think that this is a part of the strategy to enable the development to proceed in an orderly fashion at a rate we can afford, that's then covered by development contributions and then covers off all of the issues that we have been talking about for several years in terms of housing capacity. So happy to support the noting of the balanced approach, which covers off all of those other policies and directions.
Thank you. Was there any further discussion on this? Councillor Kiriopa.
I just, I know that the housing compass that underpins what Te Arawa's hopes are for housing locally, I know that's incorporated within the FDS, and I just, it wasn't on the PowerPoint, it hasn't been highlighted, I know it's within the FDS, but I really hope that that will also be empowered within the decision making around what leads towards a well-functioning urban environment. Thank you.
Thank you. There appears to be no further comments on this. So I will put that to the vote. We just have the 1 point there. That Council note the balanced approach to delivering a compact city, well-functioning urban environment and housing capacity requirements over the next 30 years, detailed in the Future Development Strategy as adopted in December 2023. Moved by Councillor Kai Fong, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? And Councillor Lee has abstained. Thank you. That's noted. We now move to our final item in public before we go to public excluded, which is only for the minutes. So I'd now, that's moved, well, okay, that's been moved by Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. Let me read it out. That the report titled Business Case Request for Travel Costs to Support Councillor Wang's Attendance at the 2024 Smart City Summit and Expo Taiwan be received. May I please put that to the vote to receive before it's overviewed. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That's carried. We will take this report as read and we'll be happy to answer any questions. I will be happy to answer any questions if you have it. Otherwise, we will open up for discussion before putting it to the vote. Question from Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Just got a couple of questions. Is Rotorua following a strategy to become a smart city or a hub for developing new technology?
There is not a strategy in place yet. However, it would be up to this council if we wanted to. Of our 4 priorities, the economy is one of those. So we certainly are appreciative of that. Innovation and technology helps to create jobs.
So you could utilise this trip as a means of gathering information to forward that argument?
Absolutely, and it's also an opportunity to share how unique Rotorua is in terms of our innovation as well. We take it for granted, but things like geothermal energy and heating, we do it at times the most sustainably in the world. So there is an opportunity at the summit for me to speak, which is why I have been invited, costs paid by the host. And the paper that we have before us is for Councillor Wang, if he could please also be allowed the cost of his flights to be covered too. So yes, this is a very good opportunity to learn. We will be doing a report back to council following the trip, which we look forward to sharing further information that we have learned with councillors and also staff if relevant too.
And I just have one subsequent sort of, I guess it's a big picture question. I'm not au fait with the sister city relationship rules other than what was supplied in the documents. But is there any risk, given the current geopolitical situation, that if we start getting involved with our friends in Taiwan, who I would totally support doing that, is that any risk that that could offend relations that we have with mainland China?
Thank you very much for that question. I assure you we have checked this quite thoroughly, but I'd like to invite our Interim Chief Executive to respond.
We specifically sought advice from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade about that issue and noting that there is support and precedent for community-to-community relationships. There was no issue raised. We specifically sent to them the draft itinerary as it's currently in place, and they were raised no concerns.
Thank you.
And just to further clarify, because we do not represent central government or the nation, it is fine to have those community-to-community discussions. So the advice that we had was that local government would not be impacted by political tensions that are currently occurring at a government-to-government level. But thank you for checking. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. Just to follow up on what Councillor Patterson said, could I just ask, and I'm quoting here, sorry, I can't see the page number, meet with Taiwanese government, sorry, there's a cross out, officials What level are we talking? Tourism? Are we talking economic? What could you break that down for me? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wang has been involved in helping to arrange the meeting, so I can get him to provide a brief update on who we have managed to secure for meetings. But just to answer that question, we did just remove that for accuracy purposes because we will be meeting with staff from the ministries, so certainly not the government leaders, which would, in our case, be a Prime Minister or a Minister. So we are having those discussions with them. Tourism is a strong focus of that, so the purpose of this report is also allowing Council to pay for the cost of some accommodation. Because the accommodation is already paid for the summit, we wanted to maximise the opportunity of us being there to have direct relationships and conversations with key tourism operators, including Air New Zealand, of which there is a direct flight from Taipei to Auckland. Yes, 2 days a week, thank you. Actually, I'm very sure it's more than that now. Oh, it is. Oh, okay. 3 days. Anyway, you can see there are substantial economic opportunities here, and also that relate to our council priority of being a world-class destination. We'll continue to do that at home, but we also need to continue to promote that to the rest of the world too. So great opportunity there, and I'd now ask Councillor Wang to provide more information on who we will be meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. I've been in contact with quite a few contacts over there as well with the Taipei City Government, which is the equivalent of a council. They have a much broader range of, I guess, responsibilities in local government than we do here in New Zealand. But primarily it would be around with their Environment Bureau, as well as meeting with their city council officials as well. The tourism promotion event, very luckily we have been able to arrange with the New Zealand Commerce and Industry Office in Taipei, in conjunction with Air New Zealand. Mia Tapsell and I will be able to promote Rotorua in this session with 6 of the largest tour agencies in Taiwan, and with that we'll be able to link in Rotorua NZ to do that promotion event for that. Are you specifically asking about the ministry visits, or? Sorry,
Forgive me, sorry. Councillor, more just what sort of type of meetings and sorry, what topics of conversation, as you say, so if it's tourism and environment, I'll be happy with that. Thank you.
Tourism, environment and culture.
Councillor Barker, followed by Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The conference is Smart City Conference, which is a very broad topic. Is there any further information on what sessions you'll be attending at the conference? That wasn't actually provided in the material.
Not yet. We have just recently completed our registration to make sure that we got in before the deadline. But once we have this confirmed, and then hopefully close to the time, there will be further information. This is a very large conference that is occurring across multiple locations in Taiwan. So we will be able to choose what specific presentations that we will go to, but the key interest from what I can see already would certainly be around environment, energy and infrastructure would be most relevant to us here. Oh, sorry, and transportation.
Thank you. I noticed also that, just a supplementary question if that's okay, with regards to the material that was provided in the report, there was no reference to the conference policy that we have as a council about elected members going to conferences and how the conference fits in with our goals, objectives, both present and looking forward into the long-term plan. So are you able to address that question for me?
So fortunately for us, the cost for the conference for both myself and Councillor Wang is completely covered. So usually, it's my understanding that usually when that will come to the table and we have further information on the conference for approval is because there's also the requirement to pay for the cost of the conference. So in this case, it was only for the flights. But as it is our usual process, we will still report back to Council on our learnings and our findings from the conference.
Thank you.
We've got Councillor Brown, then Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the two policies, international travel and sister city relationship policy, it specifically asks that the CEO approve by recommendation the business case. I don't see that in here. I'm sure for the relatively small amount of money we will get a return from that, but is it the CEO's recommendation that we approve the...
Thank you.
Sorry, I missed it.
So, yes, that's very right. So just to clarify, the report is titled business case. So it does provide the reasons on why we believe that will be beneficial for these costs to be paid for. Councillor Wang to join me. But however, you are right, the sister city policy, we do not have a business case because we do not know if we will yet proceed. The recommendation point 4 is only that we investigate the establishment of a sister city relationship with Pingtung country in southern Taiwan. So upon further discussions, if they are agreeable, we will bring that back to this council to discuss whether we wish to pursue. And just for those who may be listening or who will be unaware, there is a very strong cultural connection with this county. This is the area that it is widely researched and evidenced that Māori people actually originated from before making their migration around the world, eventually here. So there's quite significant and amazing and inspiring stories there that we look forward to sharing with them even further to see. And I should note as well, there have already been a number of Rotorua delegations, including Te Puia Māori Arts and Crafts Institute, schools. We've had our own Scotty Morrison there on his TV show The Origins. So we look forward to seeing whether that would be worthwhile to explore from a cultural perspective.
And thank you, great answer, thank you very much. One subsequent suggestion, and you may have covered it because I checked out for a second and here, the international students, attracting international students to our schools here would be a good opportunity if we could get some contacts there. I know one of the schools here is always looking for additional international students, and JPC alumni, model student over there, could probably, recommend a good school. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown, and through Her Worship, you're spot on. I've been working on that with quite a few schools, and that is something that we're going to try and link up with them as well. Next week we have actually 3 of their top performing schools from Taiwan visiting, which I have already arranged a visit with Jumbo College and a couple other schools. Thank you.
And around about the same time, there's also a number of Rotorua basketball teams that are over in Taiwan on sporting exchanges. So yes, we'd certainly look at progressing academic, cultural and sporting exchanges. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I recall when we had the annual plan consultations downstairs, I was asked by a member of the public whether Rotorua Council had signed up to smart cities already. Is anyone able to give me an answer to that?
Just to clarify, what's the smart cities? Is it a national or international?
It appears to be an international group of some description. That's maybe Councillor Wang can inform us.
Do you know?
This has nothing to do with that signatory that you're talking about. This is just what they've called the summit.
Oh, okay.
But doesn't actually... I'm aware of what you're talking about, Councillor Lee, and the smart cities, whether or not Rotorua Lakes Council is a signatory of that, doesn't actually have a link to the summit that the Mayor and I are planning, or hopefully will be attending.
Excuse me, Your Worship, could I just be of help to Councillor Lilly? I think he may be referring to perhaps the 5-minute cities, because I was also down there when that particular group, so I think there's a thing around 5-minute cities and conducive living, etc. like that. So I don't think that this quite fits in that context from what my understanding of what that group was talking about on the night. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think it was 15-minute cities that was raised there, Councillor O'Brien. I doubt that. Yeah, I just, what I'm looking at here on the screen is smartcitycouncils.com, and New Zealand has announced a global first today, becoming the first nation in the world to have all of its local councils join the Smart Cities Council. So does anyone know anything about that? What you're saying, I think, Councillor Wang, is what you're doing is not this. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. The summit itself doesn't have a connection, but we can find out to check. We are not. I've just had confirmation. We're not part of it. Yeah. Just finish your question.
No, as a matter of curiosity, Councillor Wang, through the chair, I think you had a delegation of people join when we had a site visit to the sewage treatment plant. Are you able to tell us who those people were?
That was a exchange of infrastructure. So essentially another city, the equivalent of Stavros and his team, water engineers in Taiwan, that came over to do an exchange.
Okay.
Sharing of information.
Thank you.
Councillor Kai Fong.
Thank you, Chair. Just in the interest of keeping yourself and Councillor Wang safe, and given the question that Councillor Patterson asked, I wonder if when your draft itinerary or final itinerary is published, could we delete any reference under 5.2, which talks about additional opportunities to support and promote New Zealand-Taiwan, so that we keep it at that local council to council level? Because I see that one of the points under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs meetings is the focus of discussion will be on overall Taiwan-New Zealand relations.
I see what you mean.
So it's just a question of just keeping you safe in terms of that itinerary and what the proposed visitors is about, so that we're keeping it, as you mentioned, as the Chief Executive.
Local government to local government.
Yes, as the Chief Executive has mentioned, at that community to community level.
Rather than responding on the spot, I'll just need to check whether we can do that, given that the paper's been presented. But I understand the concern, and if we can follow up afterwards.
I'm not saying alter this, but I'm saying the final itinerary, when Her Worship then confirms what she and Councillor Wang are doing, that it's very clear that any meetings are on a council to council, not at that level.
Yes.
That's what I was suggesting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this has had a mover and a seconder. I would now like to open up for any discussion, if there is any. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't ask any questions because I thought this report, very good report, it covers everything, and plus the answers that you gave. I think this is great value. I'm a supporter of sister cities and the education opportunities and trade that we have developed with all the other 4 sister cities we have. And if something develops from this, great, but that's what you'll find it. But the main emphasis is that report, the conference that 100 mayors from leaders around the globe are going to go to, that important conference, is important. And for me, strongly supporting this this proposal here is, I liked on page 42 when it said, the only Taiwanese councillor in local government in New Zealand is somebody we're supporting. to go there, and so I hope we all support that. The other one is the student exchanges. Yeah, I think that's going to be great. 2 days in Rotorua, they're coming here. The other one, the Taipei office in Auckland, they've always kept a lovely connection with us down here over the years, and to see that they're supporting the tour, the journey for them. The deputy director, I got to know November last year, going through setting up I'm only sorry that our tour in April doesn't coincide so we could support what you're doing over there. I think it would have been great. But we did meet the deputy director in the New Zealand office in Taipei, and she's a former student of Western Heights High School. And so we had, being a former student myself, we had a great conversation. But I think this is great, and even when I was there in November, even the 4 cities we visited, they wanted to talk about relationships, and they heard of Rotorua, but I made sure I didn't talk about any of that because I wasn't there for this. I was there for sport of basketball and culture that's going to happen. I think it's value for money. Look for that, what we're going to get from this. All your costs are already pretty much covered, and having Councillor Wanga over there, I think is good for Rotorua. So I'll be wholeheartedly supporting the proposal here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Now that I've had my couple of minor concerns addressed, I'm more than happy to support this. And I'm actually quite excited about the opportunity with Pingtung County and that whole history of the Polynesians' a real ancestral home that, according to science, has been proven. So, I mean, if we take, for example, the exchanges that happened during the NRL Indigenous game here, if we could get that sort of relationship going, that we got that same sort of buzz, the same sort of connection with that, the potential is endless. I see a positive outcome. I'll support this.
Thank you very much. There appear to be no others, so we'll give the close. Oh, sorry, Councillor Barker, and then we'll give the closing comments to Councillor Waru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the comments and also the report that is very thorough, and their questions were answered very well. I just would like to add a thought around this, that we have been sending messages throughout the last few months across our long-term planning and indeed our annual plan that we are going to be prudent in our spending. We're going to prioritise our spending. We're going to work at timing major projects so that we can meet our commitments and our keep financial balance within our equation. And so I just would like to caution that some members of the community might find it hard to reconcile the messages that we're sending with sending people overseas with the messages that we're sending around our long-term plan and being financially prudent. Yes, this is a small amount of money, I agree, and there are some benefits to be achieved, and we're sending 2 very good, or could be sending 2 very good ambassadors. So it's no commentary on the people and the reasons why. It's just I can see that it is a little bit in contradiction or confliction with the messages we're sending around other areas of our financial budgeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. We certainly note your comments and thank you for sharing that. We've got a few more councillors have asked to speak. So we've got Councillor Kiriopa, followed by Councillor Lee and Councillor O'Brien. And then Councillor Waru will close for us.
Thank you. I just had to look up what the 2040 Smart Cities Summit was actually about, because I couldn't see it in the report. And, did I miss that? I didn't, right. So I just looked it up, and it seems that it's around cities looking at 2050 net zero, which I support. I'm all about climate change action, but I have to say that I don't personally feel that the report really outlines what I needed to know to feel confident to make a decision. For example, I don't know what the tourist numbers are, but the relationship between Taiwan and Rotorua, and how much work has already been put into that through our New Zealand Tourism and Association, through our Rotorua Tourism. You know, even what the expo or the conferences that you're going to be attending are. There's just questions that I don't feel comfortable, even though I really want this for Councillor Wang because he's from Taiwan. But for that reason, I'm going to abstain from this vote. I'm interested in, yes, building relationships between Taiwan in terms of our Indigenous whakapapa, but whether or not sending councillors to do that is the appropriate way to be building those relationships. We have, we have mana whenua and tangata whenua throughout the country who acknowledging that you have that whakapapa too, but for that reason, I know I probably, it's not going to be a popular position, but just in terms of what Councillor Barker highlighted around the prudent spending, I don't feel that the report has identified enough for me to justify supporting, or even voting on it. I don't feel I can make an informed decision on that, so I'll be abstaining. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you, Councillor Kiriopa. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. This strikes me as something that is outside the scope of a councillor, really, and I echo the comments of Karen as the concerns that may be raised in the community. I also don't support net zero as a ambition. My politics are not green. So I will be unable to support Councillor Wang in that respect on this particular junket.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to say, first of all, I regret that use of the word junket. It seems inappropriate, but by the by. I'm sorry, I can't support it. I'll be abstaining as well. 2 points for me. One, I'd like to flag, I fully support your efforts to try and build a cultural and economic relationship. I just have a concern that for me there are significant multicultural populations in Rotorua that have a very significant impact in our society, in our community, and for this particular one, over those perhaps countries of origin with long-standing ties, it seems to me we're sort of jumping the queue somewhat when, for me, Southeast Asia, Indian and other countries as well, that have communities here that have really impacted and done a lot for this community. So the sister city thing, I appreciate it's only a starting point, but I think for me there should be there'd be a lot of other countries and cities that I'd be targeting first. I do think yourself and the interim CE, I had some concerns around the One China policy and how this would be seen, so thank you for alleviating that. But yeah, at the moment, because I just can't see that this is something that I can support, so I'll be abstaining, but I wish you well on your trip, and also Councillor Wang if he goes. Thank you.
Thank you. And final comments from Councillor Waru.
Tēnā wai te manuku reo tira tātou katoa. Tuatahi ake rā gai te tautoko au te kaupapa. So, you know, when you have a think about it, one of our goals was to have a thriving tourism economic base here in Rotorua. It's one of our things. It's in our plan. And how we forge those relationships is exactly how this has all been outlined. We have sister cities now, which actually are very useful. And they do contribute a lot. I understand the kōrero about we have many cultures that live here, but those are not necessarily the people we're aiming at to bring that growth and those you know, sharing of knowledge and things like that. So I would say that I support it. Of course I support it because I moved it, and I think I wish you both well You'd be great ambassadors for Rotorua. I do believe it is part of our job at times to go out there and promote our kaupapa. One thing I will say though, e kia koe te manukura kia kōrua, I do think we've actually missed another opportunity. Well, in that I've been on many trips, huri noi teo, me te kāwanatanga. And, you know, that cultural element always breaks the ice and always forges long-standing relationships. So, you know, if there was a bit more time, maybe you could have worked with Te Puia, maybe you could have worked with the Waitikis, but could have worked with other operators to put a group together and make a real impact over there when you're speaking. So I still support that, you know, that's another thing, but something to think about as we move forward and other opportunities come up. So, ko rongo au i ngā kōrero au e tahi atu, and kei te pai, each to their own. However, I'm going to stick to my guns and tautoko, and I wish you both well. Look forward to seeing the itinerary. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Maxwell, yes. And just so we have had point 234 moved by Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. So
yes,
Councillor Maxwell.
Happy to second it. Unfortunately, it could have been in the report, but we've already, this fund comes out of a fund we generate from delegations that come here, and we've already done 5 already. We know there's $5,000 in there, so when people think stop the spend or something, no, there is a fund that we are generating. So thank you. I thought that needed to be said to everyone.
Thank you very much. It is correct. We do charge a fee for the international delegations that visit us here, and that also helps us to balance out the cost. And this is how Council has been able to pay for the many international delegations that they have done overseas as well. So it does certainly help, although the connections that we have when they come over are very important. Look, I want to acknowledge and thank all of the councillors for your very honest feedback. I also want to acknowledge those that do have a bit of hesitancy towards this. I must admit, when it first came into my email and onto my desk, I thought to myself, I'm not too sure, but I was pleasantly surprised that they are so willing to host us, that my flights are both mine and Councillor Wang's accommodation and our fee for the summit itself is being paid for. So I think that it is very good value for money for us to ensure that Councillor Wang can join me. He has significant connections already with Taiwan. He, of course, as has already been mentioned, and although a Kiwi, he is the only councillor in New Zealand of Taiwanese descent. He can speak the language, which I'm going to look forward to when we're there, if I need a bit of assistance. But also, Councillor Wang has worked very hard with international relationships as well. So with his previous portfolios in the environment and sustainability too, I very much look forward to having a colleague join me on this summit. So I thank you for your consideration today. I think this is very good value for money, given so much, the majority of it is being covered already. And I look forward to hopefully providing you a very detailed summary of all the things that we learnt and the potential future opportunities for us here that do align with our council priorities of supporting the economy, being a world-class destination. So we do have a mover and a seconder. I'll read it out and then we'll put it to the vote. That's point 2, that Council approves the cost of flights for Councillor Wang to attend 2024 Smart City Summit and Expo, 19th to 23rd of March 2024 in Taiwan with Mayor Tapsell. I do want to note that this falls in, amazingly, a time period where we have no council or committee meetings. So we will not be missing out on our council commitments while we're gone. Point 3, that Council approves the cost of accommodation for Mayor Tapsell and Councillor Wang prior to and following the 2024 Smart City Summit and Expo. And point 4, that Council support Mayor Tapsell in an undertaking to investigate the establishment of sister city relationship with Pingtung County in southern Taiwan. That was moved by Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. You have a final comment? As
yeah, no, just the southern spelling mistake.
Oh, thank you.
Kia ora. And I just want to correct you there, e te manukura. It is, you are doing council mahi, so kia ora.
Yes, thank you. We now put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? And we have a number that are the same. So we will call a division on this to see if we have enough for it to be passed. If we do not have enough for it to be passed, then I will obviously continue on the trip as it is being paid for. However, I would not be able to have the support of Councillor Wang. So we call for a division, which just requires you to put up your hand when you place your vote, please. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, no, Councillor Wang will abstain. And any against? There's one against. And abstentions? Thank you. I do note that Councillor Wang has abstained from this vote because it will be relating to him. Because we only had one against, there were a lot of abstentions, but this has been carried. Thank you. So the remaining items that we have are just for the confirmation of minutes.
Yes, you can, if there aren't any.
I'll just double check if there were no corrections required in the minutes, we can just put them to the vote without needing to go on a public excluded. Nope, so we won't require a resolution to move into public excluded, and I'll just ask for a mover and a seconder that the confidential minutes of the council meeting held on the 13th of December be confirmed as true and correct record. It's moved by Councillor Barker, seconded by Councillor Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And finally, may I please have a mover and a seconder that the confidential minutes of the council meeting held on 20th of December be confirmed as true and correct record. That's moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Kai Fong. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Councillor Kai Fong to close our meeting with a karakia.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kia inoi tātou, kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turuki whakata ai, kia turuki whakata ai, haumia, huia, tai.